Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Equine Episode Examination, where today we will be discussing the Season 7 finale of MLP Shadow Play. So it seems like not that long ago we were here discussing the premiere of this season, and even with the short hiatus, it's gone by super quick. So got a lot to discuss today, so thank you all for joining us on this special day at a special time, since who knows how long we will be here discussing this episode. If this is your first time joining us for Triple E, just quick introduction. We're going to discuss the new episode. Everyone here in the call and in the chat is welcome to participate in this discussion and bring up discussion points in it. We're just going to give our overall opinion and initial thoughts of the episode. We'll start a little more broad with stuff like the story and work into more specific things as we go on with the discussion, like characterization, voice acting, humor, etc. We do record these live here on CinemaQuestria.com. If you're watching a recording, we do record these live. Usually we're on Tuesdays. Today we're doing a special one on Wednesday due to the Halloween yesterday. But normally we do record these on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on CinemaQuestria.com. Or if you happen to be watching somewhere else and you want to get into the chat, go to CinemaQuestria.com/stream, and from there you can enter our Discord chat and join in the discussion there. With that, I'm joined with a few people here in the call. If we all want to introduce ourselves, I'm Rain Shadow. Matt is able to join us today for the finale, which is great. So got the whole crew here for this because we got quite a bit to talk about. This is probably the most stuff I've written. I wrote this when I got home from work early this morning before I went to bed when I rewatched the episode. So quite a bit even then. So quite a bit to talk about today. So we're gonna want to get right into the discussion on this episode. So, what initial thoughts? But overall, what did everyone think about Shadowplay?
Problem with red. That's the other way, didn't we?
Yeah. Okay. Everyone can talk now. Go ahead.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. It's not the episode we're discussing today. Yeah, here we go. Cool.
All right.
Cool. So initial thoughts. Well, I have to admit this is probably the best finale we've had in quite some time. We've finally, for the first time, managed to see Star Swirl, the bearded, who really was not just an equestrian legend, but also many of the legends that were mentioned earlier in the show, like Rockhoof and Mage Meadowbrook and Mistmane and all of them. And was revealed that not only were they specific legends, but they all lived at the same time. They were basically the sort of proto-elements of harmony. And in fact, actually planted the seed that would grow into the Tree of Harmony, which led to the elements to begin with. And it's just... I really love the amazing continuity that this is built up upon, and led to events that were basically, how am I trying to say this? I really love the foundation that this was built upon, where we got a lot of the stuff from the earlier seasons to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love this two-parter. People have had complaints with these two-parters or these season finales or premieres that they try to cram a lot in, and sometimes it feels rushed. I think with this season finale, I think they've struck a really fantastic balance of having a lot going on, but also having a lot of things set up in previous episodes. Obviously, with all these legends, with obviously these characters that we've seen in previous episodes in the season, it's really sort of helped sort of at least build up those characters, or at least we get to know them at some point. As far as I'm aware, the IDW comics also help do that a bit as well. But they're still obviously supplementary to what we obviously learn in the season, which is, you know, the correct way to do things. But yeah, I mean, I just think that the season finale did a really great job of having both something that was kind of adventurous, but also very much in keeping with the spirit of the show. Because sometimes these two-parters can have a very different kind of feel to them to the sort of a regular, say, run-of-the-mill episode. But I think this finale probably meshes the two things probably the best I've seen so far in the show. And I just really, really loved the messages that this shows. And it gave every single character that was a main character in here something of importance to do. Which is not an easy thing to do when you're like using 9 sort of main characters, plus you have the pillars there as well. So you're trying to juggle like 15 characters in an episode. Well, it was 16 characters if you want to include the Pony of Shadows. So yeah, that's a lot of people to get sort of, you know, crammed into 44 minutes. But I think they did a wonderful job with it, and yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Overall, for me, it's always hard to say something like this, but actually going back to the previous episodes, but I think this is probably my favorite like two-parter, my favorite finale of the series so far. For a lot of the reasons that Matt just said. It was really enjoyable. It just used continuity. I feel like there's just so much continuity that went into this episode. And it was executed really, really well in terms of the writing and how it utilized the characters. It was really, really enjoyable to watch, and all the different things we get out of this episode, and how much it progresses the kind of series story and lore and character development in terms of just what we know about characters. Was really, really well done, and it was incredibly enjoyable. Waste no time and just go ahead and get into the story and the writing. This episode was written by Josh Haber and Nicole DeBuque. Nicole being if you don't know who Nicole is, Nicole wrote the Ponyville Mystery series along with Mike Vogel. So that was kind of her previous thing. This would be her actual first episode writing on the show. She's story edited for something we watched here last weekend, Lego Elves. She was a story editor for the first season of that, and has done a lot of other animation story work. I believe she was the story editor or one of the main writers for Transformers Rescue Bots. So she's done stuff for Hasbro before. And it looks like she's going to be heavily involved in the series going forward and into season 8. So kind of her debut episode here with Josh Haber, and really kind of knocked it out of the park there.
I like how they seem to be chucking in these new writers further and further into the deep. You have a very important. It's like Joanne and Christine.
Mm-hmm.
There was like, here, your first episode is basically the aftermath of Twilight losing the library. You know, here you go, have that.
No biggie.
Now we're going, here, have a season finale. You know, no pressure.
And we know how great they've been with writing for the series too, especially this season.
Especially this season, yeah. I mean, they've predominantly been the main story editors, obviously, with only Joss sort of taking over for the last sort of few episodes this season.
And this is definitely an interesting season in terms of story editing, since they story edited the whole beginning of the season, then kind of co-story edited a few with Josh Haber, and Josh Haber is now sort of taken over here for the last episode, which is kind of funny to think about, because this season has so much continuity and so much of a big story arc that go into this finale.
The idea of the Pony of Shadows being used for this finale was actually Joanne and Christine's to begin with, I believe. So it you know, even though they don't get a story credit here, they it was sort of their sort of idea for them to actually.
And of course, all of the legends and stuff. I mean, they story edited all of those episodes as well. So I was actually surprised they weren't kind of credited as co-story editors for this episode, because I mean, they obviously developed a lot of stuff that went into it.
It's interesting to see how so many people sort of working in a much more collaboratory way, because a lot of the writers that are on this show obviously work essentially freelance.
Yeah.
But obviously Hasbro have obviously decided that that it may well be a case that these people are obviously only available for a certain amount of time, but it seems to me that they always seem to pick really really good people to actually edit this show.
I will say that story editors won't be freelance. Story editors will actually be on Hasbro.
No. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I mean by Hasbro choosing, because obviously they obviously hire the story editors for obviously the show onto the show, and I would assume that decision is made by Megan.
Yeah.
More than likely.
I mean, it would seem, I guess, that Haber wasn't actually ever leaving the show. He must have had to, take some time away to work on Skylanders, and they got Joanne and Christine to sort of fill in for the beginning of the season, sort of like how M.A. Larson helped with some of the story editing for season 5. Which kind of makes me sad because, I mean, I love Josh Haber, and he's obviously done a great work on this episode, but it's going to be sad. Hope to see to see Joanne and Christine kind of leave that position, because I think they've done such a fantastic job this season, and so hopefully they come back and at least write a lot of episodes next season. I would love to see more stuff written by them.
I think they've written some of the best episodes of the season, even though
all of them,
they've been
all of the
story
big
editors.
episodes, all of those big episodes that that you can think of this season, they pretty much wrote. So that's saying something there. Speaking of writing, Josh Haber has now written the past 3 season finales as well as the past 4 two-parter episodes. So pretty much like the new Megan McCarthy there in terms of how much he's actually written for these big two-parter episodes.
I think that as time has gone, he's only got better.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's good to see, because I think he came from a fairly strong base when he first joined the show, but I think this season he's obviously he's only written this and the
previous episode.
Starlight, and he wrote the Starlight and some of it. So didn't he also write another episode as well before that? Was it episode 21?
I know he co-wrote the previous episode.
Yeah, he did write one on his own. The rarity one where she loses her mane.
Oh, he wrote that one.
That
Okay,
one.
I forgot he wrote one.
Yeah, not. Is it? It's not the main thing about you.
Yeah,
the
one with punk rarity in it, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he wrote that as well. I think that was like the first episode he wrote back on the show.
Yeah, he's only written one other episode this season. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then all the other ones have been co-written with someone else. So. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, considering how much they had to juggle with this episode, I think the writing in this episode was absolutely top notch, and it's a lot of people scoff when they see like the Wikipedia article for the show and they see that it's called high fantasy, but then you see just how much continuity and sort of backstory and stuff is used in this two-parter, and it's like, yeah, it pretty much is high fantasy now.
I know that mentioned it in chat already, so I'll mention here as well the Pony of Shadows. Bringing that back as the villain for this finale, from all the way back in season 4, which was hilariously enough Josh Haber's first episode that he wrote on the show back in season 4, with the
it's like he planned
the Pony of Shadows. It's kind of a nice little kind of bookend there for that, but I guess bringing back a character from that long ago as well, and actually it was kind of a legend. I mean, kind of like one of the first quote unquote legends of all the ones that were featured in this episode there, as the villain was a nice little touch there of continuity.
Just what Mr. Ben was saying there about thinking that the shadow in Castlemania was Tyrek. That was what we assumed who it was in season 5. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's ever been confirmed. And to be honest, I think sort of the mystique of it kind of means that I don't really want it to be. If you know what I mean.
Well, here's the thing: the Pony of Shadows itself as a concept obviously is what we got in this episode. Now, the figure we actually saw at the end of the episode, there's no way that could have been the Pony of Shadows, because he was been, obviously trapped in limbo.
So yeah, it could well have been T-Rex.
Yeah. So the figure at the end could have, obviously nothing's ever been kind of canonized with that. You could either see it as, yes, that was T-Rex, roaming around, slowly gathering back power, because we know he had escaped from that point already. Or you can just say it was the episode being kind of cheeky and having a dun-dun-dun kind of ending.
Yeah, so it's because obviously the story of the Pony of Shadows is kind of a bit like the story of Nightmare Moon, where basically sort of everyday ponies had sort of essentially made it as like an old tale that you either sort of tell fillies to scare them.
Pretty much like all of the Legends tales.
Yeah. And essentially, because it was sort of happened such a long time ago, obviously it was sort of assumed to just be fiction, not necessarily something that was real. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the only way that they found out that this was happening was essentially by Sunburst basically shopping with Twilight in an antique store, essentially. I find it amazing that Twilight hadn't found it, considering it was an antique store in Ponyville. You'd have thought she'd have read virtually every book that was ever in that small town / village.
Well, it was also in a barrel. It was in a.
It might be it might have been new stuff that had come in.
It was probably a bunch of new books that they had gotten in, and they had put it in one of those loot crates because they didn't know what to do with any of these things. So. It
Damn
makes
loot
sense
boxes!
Yeah.
You can't even get away from them from Pony. That'll be how they show the episodes next. You just download them and you don't know which order you're going to get them in.
Speaking of that book, though, the opening for this episode, that cold open there before we get to the opening credits, the opening title sequence there was really, I mean, that was probably one of my favorite openings, cold opens to an episode since the first episode of the show. Had a very similar feel to that, with the storybook opening and the narration over it, telling sort of some of the lore and the story. With here we have Star Swirl finally, narrating over that opening with that book sequence was just so incredibly well done and enjoyable to watch. I was already really looking forward to this episode, but watching that sequence last weekend it just made me that much more excited for the episode, because it was just so so well done and so well written, and voice acted as well. It was. Episode was too hype for me. It was like I forgot about Mario Odyssey when I was watching this episode. That says something right there.
That's how good it was.
Yeah.
What I find fascinating is obviously sort of the way it opened is sort of in a similar kind of style to how season 1, the whole show itself started, but you can also see sort of how far we've come, because as good as the opening for the first episode was, in terms of the animation, I think the animation and the style that's used in the season 7 finale, you can see just how much more accomplished the show has become as time has gone on. And I find it now that the show is now really not afraid to push the boundaries. I mean, a lot of people have thrown their arms up in the air saying, "Oh, there's a character that's now actually an actual character in the show and will appear occasionally with Daring Do," and everyone was throwing their arms around. Well, instead of having one character like that, let's have 7, shall we?
I mean, the season 1 premiere has a lot of issues, and I know a lot of people it's not their favorite episode, even though usually the first 2 seasons are regarded as it's the best. But I really have always loved that season premiere, specifically for sort of that opening, because it was one of the most kind of magical experiences I've had watching the show. Was that it was kind of a moment that the show hadn't really done much before, like sense like that, like they had with that sequence. It was just something so cinematic and magical, and just bringing you into this world. And really, this was like the first time I felt like that again since watching that season premiere, when we're having this very kind of magical storybook, mythological, opening narrated by Starswell himself. It was such a surreal and great experience for me to watch.
In a sense, it's you get the feeling that this is like a sort of a new beginnings. In a sense, learning new and perhaps even have similar, but obviously from a different perspective, lessons with some of these new pillars. Obviously, as we, obviously we haven't even really talked too deep into the story, but obviously at the end we obviously have them back, and they're essentially going to be characters that the show can use, and I can see them being used, quite heavily at some point at least. I have my thoughts on that, and I'll get to that sort of as we sort of get to later on, because obviously it's the end of the episode. What I find sort of fascinating is that the show is not afraid to push on and have these new characters now. It's at one point you would think that there would be a case of hesitation of doing these things because of the blowback, but honest and truthfully, I am glad that they do keep doing these risks, because a lot of the time they work. Not always, not every time. I'm not gonna argue that they work every time, but a lot of the times they seem to be really making the show much more of a larger sort of world than it was prior. And don't get me wrong, I mean, if you remember back to the season 1 premiere, it does a fantastic job of as many problems as people say that it has, and I have some issues with it. It's not bad by any means, but I do have some issues with it. But the one thing I can always praise it for is it always seemed to make the world a pretty big, epic-y kind of place and feel. And it's kind of amazing that of all sort of the shows that were shown on the hub, it was this one that sort of had the most grandiose kind of feel to it, which is kind of astonishing when you consider the franchise this is.
Yeah, and it's funny because the series had that kind of opening, that big grandiose opening, but then it kind of transitioned more to like a slice of life thing, and it wasn't really till more recent seasons where we got a lot more episodes that were sort of more worldy, grandiose action episodes. Starting with kind of like the season 2 premiere, and then kind of maybe getting a little bit more frequent every season since then. But it's that's one of the reasons I think I like so much of these. They don't have the slice of life episodes, but they have a lot more continuity and world building in them. And kind of speaking of stuff like that, in a season that's sort of been filled, and this is something we've talked about a lot here in AAA this season, a season that's sort of been filled with episodes and stories that we've been really wanting to see for seasons, whether that be Applejack's parents, or like a Celestia and Luna episode, or an episode more focused on Celestia and Twilight, etc., etc., etc. This finale really kind of continued to deliver on that trend, kind of spades. We finally get an episode that not only focuses on Star Swirl, which actively expands his lore greatly, but also one where he actually appears in and has dialogue and plays a huge part in, which is insane. And this is one of those things that, just like the Cutie Mark Crusaders getting their cutie marks or anything else, it's something I know that a lot of us have been really waiting to see, and that's some expansion on Star Swirl and his lore. I think that's something that they had to really intentionally do, say more than 1,000 years, because we already know that 1,000 years ago was when Celestia and Luna were in charge, and they banished Celestia, so it would have to be more than that, since they disappeared when they were younger. Yeah.
Can I just say that Equestria 1,000 years ago was one fucked up place?
Took the words right out of my mouth.
They kind of even talk about that a little bit in the episode here, where so Sorcerer's like, oh yeah, so the land has been at peace for the past however long. He's like, Pinky's like, no, not really.
Just amazing that you can say that in an MLP world. MLP, this is a world that's going to be all flowery and sunshine and flowers. Actually, no. No, there's been quite a lot of fucked up shit happen. At least in this version, at least in this generation.
I think one of my favorite things about this episode is something that we've talked about a lot this season. I think this has been one of the major strengths of the season, and that's just the continuity. But more than just that, it's the amount of continuity from multiple seasons that kind of went into this episode. It's really astounding when you look at it. Not just all of the setup this season with Starlight and with all the legend episodes, individual legend episodes that we had that feed into this episode, but then the continuity with Star Swirl and continuity with Twilight and the Podium of Shadows, and I can go on and on and on about all the continuity hits that this episode has, and how almost like all of these different events and characters and stuff from the entire series of the show is all kind of been fed and leading into this episode. And it was such a really cool thing to watch because of that, being that, we've been watching this show for 7 years and 7 seasons now. To have all this stuff sort of come together in this episode was really something else to watch.
Although, as great as that is, perhaps the only thing I will say about this episode is that it's really not an episode to watch if you're a newbie. You really need to watch, at least quite a few episodes prior to this to really get, the entire, the sort of the experience. I'm not saying that you couldn't watch this as a standalone, thing, but I think you're really missing out on quite a bit if you do so.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why people are saying, oh, this should have been the movie story. No, this wouldn't have worked as the movie story. I mean, it would have been great to see on the big screen with a little more time and animation. But in terms of story, especially when you're wanting to use the movie to kind of maybe bring new viewers into the show, this obviously is just not going to work for that. Not to mention, even if you take out the series wide continuity aspect, if you're like, okay, I'm okay with having a movie where that uses continuity heavily and might not be as great for newbies coming in. Even if you look past that, the main reason this story wouldn't work is because how continuity-wise it is within the Season 7. There's so much stuff in Season 7 that's building up to this movie. You couldn't have used this movie's plot because you would have been missing all of the history of the legends. You would have been missing the previous episode that builds into this. You would have to be having this movie continue after a season, which has all sorts of logistical problems, obviously. So no, this wouldn't have worked in the movie, so sorry. And that's one of the reasons why I as much as I love the movie, I do think the stories and a lot of the episodes within seasons are stronger. And I think it's just because of the nature of television and writing television and how it's able to use continuity, where the movie really was kind of at a handicap with that.
Yeah, the movie is hamstrung by the fact that it can't use too much continuity. Whereas I think the problem with the movie is that it I wouldn't say it was a halfway house, but I think the movie did a fairly poor job of really introducing us to the world and characters, really. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But the thing is with this finale is, by this point, I mean, we're 7 seasons in, and I get the feeling that with especially this season was made out of the love of the show and for the fans, basically, because there's so much continuity here that really you need to be a fan to get the absolute maximum out of this season. And that's not a criticism at all. I mean, when you're getting to 7 seasons, I think you can kind of indulge yourself like that, because if you don't, you stagnate and you don't develop. And I think the show has developed to a point now where it's using its continuity and its lore is I think almost a sign that the show has matured and evolved over time, and the fact that we can bring those elements back and make something new from it, or something interesting, or something really fascinating to take sort of stock and note of. I think that's a real sign of how strong the show has become and how strong the show can still be. That they can actually do stuff like that, because the last thing that I would want this show to do would be to do the same thing over and over. I mean, there are people that lament the fact that we don't get the letters to Celestia, for example. Could you imagine if we were still doing that at this point? How stagnant and stale that would feel by now. It's very difficult to have. They say that there's only so many different story types under the sun, but you're really limiting yourself if you have the same framework over and over. And I think the show has done a really great job of essentially reinventing itself at times.
Yep.
And
it hasn't been
that core idea of friendship.
Yeah, and like DM12 is saying, it's again injecting the show with some new characters, and we're keeping them around, so now we have even more possibilities of new stories to sort of be told around the new characters and new lands to explore and visit as well. And I think that's something that the past 3 or 4 seasons have been really good at, is introducing new things to the show that we can revisit a lot, and progressing the show so it doesn't stagnate like that.
Like the CMC's finally in their cutie marks, not being stagnant with that plot.
Yeah, I mean, like what we said back when we discussed that episode, it's like, okay, we've had 5 seasons now of the CMC trying to find their cutie mark. That kind of whole story plot is kind of getting stale now. I mean, do we want another episode where they're just trying to find their cutie mark? So I think it was definitely a good point to let's have them get that and have them move on from there to tell new stories. And that's one of the big reasons why the show has 7 seasons has remained so good and not stale. I know this is something that Matt mentioned earlier, but it's something that has really impressed me with the writing, and is just how large of a cast of characters this episode had. All of the main 6, Starlight, Spike, all of the pillars of Equestria, and all these other characters, and yet somehow they each kind of got a fair amount of screen time, and each had their own sort of importance to the episode. It didn't really feel like any of the characters didn't need to be there, were shoehorned in, or anything. Obviously, a lot of Twilight, Starlight had bigger parts than some of the other main 6, but they really worked in all of the characters into the episode really well. And of course, with their relation to each of their relations to the old pillars of Equestria, each of them really seemed to have a good purpose in it and got a good amount of screen time into it.
Can I just say that there's another thing that from this episode that makes me really hope happens sometime in the future? I really want a Rainbow Dash and Spike episode.
Yes.
I think that's fantastic.
Yes, that was a surprise, and it worked really, really well in this episode.
Yeah, Rainbow Dash and Spike actually play off each other really well.
And this
I
is
get
something...
the feeling that Rainbow Dash would like Ember as well. Just call it a hunch.
Not as much as Starlight, though.
Oh no, no one.
Starlight, Ember.
We can't stop the bromance.
Why do I get the weird mental image that Rainbow Dash and Ember would somehow compete in like a flex off or something like that? I don't know.
It's the sequel to the Iron. It's the sequel to the Iron Pony competition, but it's the Iron Reptilian Equine Championship Peony thingy.
I think this episode also, one of the things I really liked about the writing and the continuity with Haber story editing, writing both these episodes, is sort of how they used the previous episode to set up that. The previous episode obviously set up the book and set up Sunburst's involvement in this story, which was great because both of those things didn't need to be set up at all in this 2-parter. You didn't need to ask why Sunburst is here. You didn't need to ask where the book came from or why. All of that was set up throughout the story in last week's episode, almost making it sort of like a part 1 or like a prequel to leading into this episode, which was really great, not only just from a continuity perspective, but just taking some of the story weight off of this episode. So that's one less thing they had to do in this episode, and they were able to focus that time more on other things. And of course, we had multiple new locations as well. I kind of joked about this earlier this season, but it seems to be holding true that this season has seemed to had more locations than in the Exploring Equestria seasons. So we got to see Ponehenge, of course, in this episode that played a big part, and we also finally got to see Hollow Shade, something we've known about for a while, something that back when we were on IRC and having the new episodes, that was one of our 6 new episode discussion chat rooms.
I was about to ask about that.
And this is the last of those 6 location chat rooms that we had on IRC to be featured in the show. All the other ones have been featured in the show before. This one finally, Hollow Shades finally gets shown in the show and explored a little bit, which was neat.
I remember Tim in the chat room mentioning something about how Hollow Shades was effectively like an equestrian version of Darkest Dungeon.
I'm not really familiar with that, so.
It's a video game.
Okay. I also just really liked how the setup and the lore progression that this episode has. More than just bringing Star Swirl back into an episode and having him pretty much making Star Swirl on the old pillars of Equestria here be the old main 6, sort of like the old guard that before the main 6 were here. I really liked that, and the kind of like the mirroring that they have with each of the main 6 themselves. I think that was a really cool thing to sort of to have here, and it fit really well into the continuity of the series.
Okay, I'm back. Just
Awesome.
if I'm going to be here a while, I should actually get some water. That would be a good idea.
One question I sort of have to ask for everyone about this episode is, because it's a complaint that I've seen brought up by some people since the episode premiered. Does this episode have too much plot contrivance? And mainly that's relating to the map and sort of like how the map kept leading them to places.
I don't think so myself, personally.
You could say that every map episode is full of plot contrivance by them just sending them wherever. So it's a complaint you can make, but you could make that complaint to a lot of other episodes in the show. So it's there, but I don't think it's...
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't really think it does, just because it does a good job of kind of setting up or explaining any of the plot contrivances it has, and a lot of them are kind of based on series continuity, so they pretty much explain the book's activation at Ponehenge is probably like the first kind of contrivance where it's like, oh, what do we do? What do we know? And the book kind of opens up and shows them that vision and stuff. They explain that in the episode. Obviously, the book has a strong magical connection to that place because of the spell that Star Swirl did there. Of course, it would make sense that the map would have a connection to the Pillar's relics and have the ability to kind of show them the location of them, since the map themselves, the map itself was created by a seed, which was created by those the Pillars of Equestria as well. So it would make sense that it has a connection to them. And really, the part where the map shows them where to find the villain makes the most sense. Pretty much after all, this episode winds up being a map episode. So even though it doesn't really appear so at first, this is actually a friendship problem episode. And so the map kind of calling the friendship problem's attention to the main 6 is something that's already been established through multiple seasons. So, I mean, this even works into a kind of a plot point with Starlight trying to call attention to Twilight that the map calls them for friendship problems. So it really, to me, while some of these things can be seen as definitely contrived, I think it's something that is built enough into the series history the past 3 seasons since we've been introduced to the map, and also what this episode sets up in terms of Star Swirl and the Pillars' involvement in the elements of harmony and the map itself, that it at the very least it makes sense what is happening. So you may be able to call it contrived, but it's not really, you can't really make it into a negative because it makes sense within the context of this episode in the universe of the world that they've set up.
I mean, with the map itself, essentially it's basically a way of speeding up things, because if you don't have the map, you're having to essentially have the ponies bump into a friendship problem. Essentially, that they'd have to bumble into one basically, or get sent somewhere for a specific reason, which would be no more or less contrived than the map sending them there, really. So it's an issue. You can make it an issue if you want, but honestly, it's there, and I'm not can see it like that. But I think you're picking nits, but by that point, really, I really do.
On that subject, this is also, of course, the first time we've seen the map call all of the main six since the season 5 premiere as well.
Yeah, which they nice and remind Starlight of that time when you brainwashed essentially our entire village. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
It's a magical supervillain tracker. Oh, no offense.
Hey, at least she's magical. I do wonder if the next time we have that, it will be used on Scorpan, but that's for another episode of Triple A. Something that we haven't touched on. Are we still essentially talking about the writing and the story here?
Oh, yeah, we have a lot to talk about with the story, so yeah, we're still on the writing.
I want to talk about a little bit about what they do with Twilight here. Obviously, she is a huge nerd, no shit. But more specific to that, she is a huge fan of the works of Starswell the Bearded. So when she gets to actually meet him, she has a serious problem of hero worship, and it gets to a point where it clouds her regular judgment as the Princess of Friendship, and she essentially basically uses what Starswell would do over her own instincts, and it actually takes Starlight, who's obviously learnt those things from Twilight, to actually show her that maybe you're looking at this from an angle that you would not normally look at yourself normally. You're looking at this from the angle of Starswell because of your hero worship of him, and it takes a little while, but it's interesting to see that Starlight is actually come round eventually, even though it essentially takes her being essentially so right that no one can sort of say that she's wrong. But I honestly think that it shows that Twilight is still can still be swayed very easily if it's something that's really sort of her sort of, it's sort of like a fangirly sort of thing, I suppose, but more a sense of when you read the teachings of something that you've looked up to for basically your entire life, and you get to meet that person, there's always going to be a case of clouding your judgment or making your judgment based on what they would do, not necessarily what you would do yourself. And I think they cover that pretty well here. It's not a case of don't meet your heroes, but don't expect to act like your heroes, because you are your own person, and that you should feel is right, not necessarily what someone else does.
One of the things that this episode did is it sort of that I really liked as well, in addition to the continuity, is how it continues to build upon that in the series' lore as well. Of course, we finally get to an episode dealing with Star Swirl, and we bring all the legends from this season back, and it's revealed that they of course planted the seed to grow the Tree of Harmony and the elements, and eventually the castle and the map. So I mean that's kind of a big deal there, and I love how it kind of fits in where you have sort of this old guard planting this seed for eventually the main six to pick up and sort of pick up where they left off, and I really love that bit of world building for the show there. Wasn't it? I mean, yeah, I guess the princesses too, but of course we already sort of knew that because we knew that Celestia and Luna knew Star Swirl and brought in under him. It wasn't. I'm trying to remember the journal of this two sisters that came out, and I believe it was Star Swirl himself that was one of the ones that brought them in to help protect Equestria. I believe in that. It's been a while since I've read that, but I believe that's how I believe they had Star Swirl, and that actually be the one that sort of brought Celestia and Luna in and Alicorns in to try and help save and keep Equestria safe there.
Will be interesting to see if we ever actually see how, a proper 100% canonical, say even just like a flashback of how Celestia and Luna actually ended up becoming the monarchy of Equestria, or the de facto monarchy, I should say. That would be actually very interesting to see. Whether we will actually see that, of course, is another matter. But yeah. I think what I find interesting is it's not just Twilight that's absolutely, desperate to see him come back. Even Celestia and Luna have no real objections. You would think that they would be much more pragmatic in something like that, but it's the one that's most pragmatic, I should say, is Starlight. And I think that's a shines a beacon on how much she's learned, not just obviously of her own volition, but obviously from Twilight and sort of others as well, as she's obviously become reformed. And a lot of people complain about that, Starlight was reformed in the first place, but I think it's given so many opportunities now, and we've had so many great stories that have come from that, not just here, but obviously seeing the Celestia and Luna episode that we had earlier in the season as well, that there are so many opportunities with Starlight as she is now versus what there would have been with how she was in season 5, or the majority of season 5, that I honestly think that they made the right decision in the end. It may not seem like at first that you think, oh, there's still quite a bit of villainy we could get out of her, and I'm not saying that there wouldn't have been. I think there might have been, but I think eventually it would have become pretty stale, and it would have been the same thing, over and over. I mean, do we really need a villain of the week? Do we really need something like that in this show? I don't think we do. I think you can have some characters that stay villainous throughout. I mean, we've had Chrysalis, and obviously Sombra is essentially the same sort of thing, even though he's only appeared essentially once in the show. But you can have that. But I think you can have a mixture of both, and I can't see why that would not work. And I think the show has shown that it can work fantastically.
And one of the other things we get to see in this as well is, of course, the Tree of Harmony being brought back again, as well as seeing the elements again, which we haven't seen at all since the season 4 premiere and a little bit in the season 4 finale. So it was nice to see them being brought back, and being brought back in such a kind of big and meaningful way in terms of how they played into Star Swirl and the rest of the pillars thousands of years ago there. One of the other things.
I'm just wondering.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
you go, because I'm going on a completely different tangent. So if
I was just going to say with the obviously the bearers, obviously, we could call the main six the bearers now, I suppose, but also the pillars as well. I'm just wondering if there are any more like groups of six ponies that sort of from the past or even into the future, because obviously we can time travel in this universe. After all, Twilight has shown that we can time travel. I wonder if there will be future bearers or pillars or something similar that based around the elements or whatever.
Maybe before Star Swirl, but I don't think in between, because like it was kind of Star Swirl and the pillars. In terms of the groups protecting Equestria, it was Star Swirl and the pillars, and then there was multiple years of Celestia and Luna, and then now we got of course the main six. After that.
I mean the main six essentially became the bearers in lieu of the fact that obviously Luna had been banished to the moon.
Yeah.
So
And of course next we have Starlight and Trixie. So
Starlight, Trixie, Maud,
just Starlight and Trixie.
CMC,
protectors of Equestria.
Discord.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked about this episode and the continuity was just bringing is how this season was structured, like season arc wise, with all the legend episodes, and we have all these. Of course, we had the Campfire Tales episode, which gave us 3, and then we had 2 additional episodes, which were kind of different stories each, but each of them involved one of the legends as well. And I just loved how they brought all these back in this episode from the season all together here, and had all those episodes have this big meaning to the overall season plot. And then sending each pony off to kind of like both work with to get the relic, and then to work with the legend that they told of and encountered in the season. And then sort of have each of them be related to them as sort of like the previous incarnation of the element. It's just really cool and amazing how much... And then when you also consider, of course, that the comics have canon with this as well to expand upon all these stories, it's just amazing how much planning and overall writing went into this season and the season's arc before this episode was even written. And I just really loved that continuity and... between all of these different things and all these episodes and comics and stuff this season. Really something that the series hasn't done, and it just really amps up the continuity to a level that the series hasn't really experienced before. And of course, speaking of continuity, of all the continuity things I was expecting in this episode, the one that caught me completely off guard, of course, was the continuity with Equestria Girls and Rainbow Rocks, where we see the Sirens make an appearance and a flashback, and we actually get to see Star Swirl and Company banishing them to the Equestria Girls universe, which, of course, we had heard of previously in a storybook in Rainbow Rocks. And that one, when Twilight was and Sunset were reading about that in sort of one of the stories about Star Swirl. So it was nice. It's actually really cool to see that actually happen animation wise in this, and having them be back with that.
Can I've got something I'm going to have a bit of a rant.
Uh-oh.
It's not about the episode.
Strap in.
It's not about the episode. Can I just be annoyed that people are saying, "Oh, finally, Equestria Girls is canon"? It's like,
yes,
but Equestria Girls was always canon. The Twilight Sparkle of Friendship is Magic went through the portal to Equestria Girls. Therefore, it is canon. I don't get how people are now saying, "Oh, it's now canon." It's like it always was canon.
I've actually seen people. I've actually seen people trying to argue that this appearance still doesn't make it canon. And it's the most funny roundabout argument that I've seen. You can absolutely not like Equestria Girls. I'm not going to say that you have to like Equestria Girls, but to like this show as well, that's fine. But to say that it's not canon, especially now at this point, you're kind of sort of denying the inevitable. I mean, will we ever see a Equestria Girls / MLP, FIM crossover? Maybe. I mean, it's entirely possible.
but I can't see where the harm is of actually, having these two things much more entwined as they are, because really and truthfully, they always kind of were,
Yeah.
I don't
it's still not like
see the problem. And I think it's a really cool thing that they did have the sirens here,
I think the argument that the person was using was that it's not something in the Equestria Girls universe that's affecting this story, being that we're not actually seeing like the sirens coming back from Equestria. We're seeing or coming back from the Equestria Girls universe. We're seeing them being in this particular story being banished off there. But it's such a roundabout way of saying that there's no continuity in between these two series anymore. It's just,
I mean, there's not a lot shared between the two.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true that really nothing.
But there's enough tangentially to make it. The events of both shows are entwined into the same story canon, even though they don't have a huge amount of overlap.
I mean, it's still true that really nothing in Equestria Girls has affected the main show's world in terms of that. Like we've seen a lot of things like Starlight being brought over to Equestria, stuff like that, but not really much the other way around. But I mean, come on, it's such a stupid, childish thing to say. Oh, that's not canon. When, okay, I mean, and now it doesn't really matter anyway because the two universes are so separated.
Because I don't like it. That's basically what it boils down to.
But it doesn't really even matter anymore anyway, since the two universes are so incredibly separated now that they have Sci-Twi over there and they're not bringing Twilight over. They're their own things now. Just get over it.
Hey, I would love to see the sirens in that form in this show. I would absolutely love to see that. I think that would work really well. In fact, so bring it on. But it's a case of if you're always going to have the naysayers of either the show as it is now or just Equestria Girls in general. So. Of the writers and the show staff using the tools at their disposal, and I think that they did a fantastic job here.
Yeah,
it's more continuity, and it's continuity not just with previous. Because really and truthfully, I think it was a really great use of the sirens.
Yeah, I mean, and it made so much sense in the context of the story here that, okay, we're going to show a scene where we want to see Stygian not feeling left out, and we see the rest of the rest of the pillars saving Equestria and stuff, and instead of just creating a completely new scenario, we already have in the lore of the show of both this series and Equestria Girls that Star Swirl has banished the sirens at one point. So let's just use that and just show that scene. It was really cool to see. It reminded me a lot of the season 4 premiere where we get to see a lot of stuff that happened in the past, like with Celeste and Luna. Just like that. It was a great moment to finally see something that happened in the past and make it kind of tie into this episode's plot. And of course, it was a very big part of this episode's plot because it's the part where we see Stygian starting to feel left out of the rest of the group there.
Something that they've been mentioning in the chat here about obviously the canon and how the comics work into this. I know I have a bit of a bias here, and you could say it's an anti-IDW bias. I'm not anti-IDW. I have my issues with what they've done in the past. But in terms of the canon, the comics to me are always going to be supplementary. But I will admit and say right now that especially since this season, the comics have become a lot more. I would say have become a lot more reliant on the show for its own canon, because it seems to me, honestly, code canon from their end. That's how it feels to me. But whether that's true or not, I've got no idea. I mean, obviously, I don't read the comics now, but from what I can tell, it was essentially these, the legend books will help expand even further what we've already got. And in that sense, I have absolutely nothing against that. And the fact that you don't need season as you I'm all for that. Oh, bloody hell.
Heard you there.
Yeah, we hear you now, but you were breaking up really badly.
Oh, so it's just me. Okay.
Did you catch like the gist of what I said or not really?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. Like I say, IDW books, I've got nothing against them essentially, if other people enjoy them. But what I will say is, it seems to me that now that they are becoming a lot closer to the canon of the show and essentially having to use some of the show itself, it seems to be that it's increased the quality of the work there, which is great. But it also essentially makes comics less of its own thing as well, though. That it's relying more on the canonicity of the show than sort of creating its own canon.
This episode also really had some just really great dialogue and character interactions throughout. It's between like all the stuff with Star Swirl and all the main six and the pillars as well. I just really loved a lot of the dialogue interactions in the show. And really,
Burst is best nerdy shit.
the episode really spends just the right amount of time, I think, with each of the main six as they gather the relics. They each get like a little bit of time, and it's different for each of them, but based on how kind of complicated that part of the story is, and it keeps things moving along nicely. And I think it highlights the ones that needed to be highlighted a little bit more.
And honestly, I think if you want the best evidence of how far Spike has come in the past couple of seasons, the fact that he has an equal part with the rest of the main six and actually has to play his part and actually has to do something of pretty high significance to help out is kind of proof of how far we've come since, I would say probably since the beginning of since sort of the end of season 4, really. We've come a long way from that point.
Speaking of continuity, so I'll just throw this out really quick so I can check it up on my list here. The mention of the book of sea pony etiquette. Just being that we know that the movie takes place after season 7.
Don't steal stuff that's theirs.
So. No, it didn't say that, so Twilight didn't know. But it was a nice
plausible
little bit of
deniability, eh?
Yeah. It was a nice little bit of foreshadowing there in the terms of the series there.
There it is.
On another subject, I really loved also what they did, like I've mentioned before, with the elements and sort of the old elements of the old pillars of Equestria there, and specifically like the names of the old elements, where they have hope, strength, bravery, beauty, healing, and sorcery. I really like that, how they have very, very similar elements to what they had, but at the same time, a lot of them are a little bit different than the elements that the main six has.
Note that with Starswell, his was sorcery, which essentially sorcery is a very different thing to magic here. And obviously, remember with the tagline of this show being "Friendship is magic," obviously that dual wields with Twilight to friendship, but with obviously Starswell, that's not the case at all. He thinks much more on a logical plane of this is a thing that needs doing, and this is how we'll get it done. It's a lot more militaristic, sort of more.
Well, all of it, yeah.
More.
It's kind of like all of them are too. It's when you look at the difference between like the main 6 elements and the Pillars of Equestria elements, you get this difference between sort of the element embodying the pony itself, and the element embodying what they do to help other people. Like obviously sorcery is really good with magic, but it mentions nothing about, of course, friendship or magic itself, which is also friendship. You get stuff like beauty is one of them, where of course I compare that to Rarity's generosity, which is obviously a lot more something that is allowing the element itself to affect other people rather than just being itself. Or bravery. Being brave about something speaks a lot about the person of the element itself, but being loyal is something completely different. You're still Rainbow Dash is obviously still brave, but she's more than that. She's loyal, and she expands that to other people.
It feels more like with these original ones that they're like an end point to something that's a lot less specific when it comes to the bearers. Like with healing, that is something that you can do as a act of kindness, but it could also be something that you're doing as essentially that it could essentially be your job. I mean,
exactly,
you could be a nurse, it's a lot more. I think they're a lot more focused. These older obviously the pillars, they it's more of a skill set than necessarily a something that's a lot more broad and more encompassing than what the bearers have.
Or you look at something like hope is something that Somnambula had. She was hopeful, and that's what got her through a lot of situations and helped her help other people. But something like Pinky, hers is laughter or optimism. That's something she's actively spreading to other other ponies in the world. She's not just being optimistic herself.
Well,
she's spreading that. Yeah,
it's the same with kindness. That's something else that you can spread. You can spread your kindness with others, and they can then in turn spread that kindness with others too. Whereas with healing, you're helping a pony essentially get better, which is still an act of kindness in of itself, but it's only one end point of kindness.
And I think it's kind of like the difference between the old pillars and the main 6, where the old pillars were sort of like a superhero group where they're going out there and they're helping Equestria, they're helping save Equestria and helping other people. But the main 6 are much more than that. They're doing more than just kind of going out there and saving people or helping Equestria. They're actually going out there and using their elements to make Equestria a better place. They're spreading those elements to other ponies in Equestria. Heck, that's been the whole plot point of like the past 3 seasons with what is Twilight's goal as a princess, to spread the magic of friendship. She's just not out there just saving people or saving Equestria. She's out there actively spreading that magic of friendship to other ponies, and I think that's the big difference between sort of the old guard and the new guard here.
Can I also just say that it also happens to really flow into like how the old pillars' virtues became sort of like the new elements of harmony. Kind of like how take Raku's strength into honesty. It's one thing to be physically strong. I mean, you can be strong in the sense that you can lift boulders and dig a trench in like a single day with nothing but a shovel. But strength isn't just limited to just physical strength. It can also mean emotional strength. It can also mean mental strength, strength of character. And honesty takes a lot of strength of character. It takes a lot of strength of heart to constantly choose to tell the hard, honest truth, as opposed to just constantly going to easy lies. It's also one thing to not just tell the truth, but also to seek it out, to prove and to disprove the lies and the deceit. It takes someone with a strong set of character, strong set of morals, to filter that out and constantly seek that.
Just something else that I've sort of thought of as you've been talking about that is with the get myself really muddled up here. Not the bearers, the others, the pillars. With the pillars, they are essentially like they are essentially basically the leaves or the end product, like the seeds of what is essentially the main sort of foresight of the if you use the element, if you use the tree as an analogy, the bearers are essentially the sort of the trunk, the main sort of foundation of these things, and then essentially the pillars are essentially some of the end results of that main trunk of, you know, say an offshoot of kindness is healing, an offshoot of honesty is, you know, you could say an offshoot of hang on, let me get the thing. You know, the end result of sorcery is you know, the end result of magic is being, you know, of sorcery and stuff like that. It's essentially the bearers, you know, the main six are essentially the sort of the foster what would actually help. I think what they also do is essentially bring out the best of people, and some of the end result is things like healing. It's like Twilight helped to heal Sakura, but that was through an act of her kindness and her essentially her determination to heal Sakura. That was obviously the end result, but that it was, you know, it's a lot more of a central thing with the main six versus, you know, the pillars that we have.
Yeah, that's again was one of my favorite parts. Was just that relationship between the pillars and the main six, and how different and the same they are. And again, getting another word that sort of represents the elements but represents them differently. Again, that was one of my favorite parts of this season 3 finale, Magical Mystery Cure, when Celestia sort of used those better terms to describe the elements, like optimism and stuff, laughter and stuff like that. I think the terms that Celestia used there represent the main six's elements much better than what we normally hear. What was Fluttershy's? It wasn't kind. It was not kindness. It was empathy, I believe. Was it empathy? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, empathy and kindness are
Yeah.
similar things, but empathy you can have empathy with the difference between kindness and empathy is obviously empathy is you can emphasize with necessarily things that aren't necessarily kind.
Yeah.
There's you can have an empathy for, you know, someone's doing a bad thing, but you can empathize with it if it's like doing something for the greater good sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like say, for example, if you say in a nature reserve you're having to cull a certain animal because their population has gotten out of control. It's not a kind thing to do to obviously cull some of those animals, but in terms of you know, of it being to help the other animals, then you have an empathy for that, whereas it wouldn't necessarily be an act of kindness essentially.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of magical mystery cure as well, this episode references that episode quite a few times. It's not something that has really been referenced that much for as big of an episode that was for the series. It's not something the series has actually gone back and referenced a lot. So it was nice to have so many references to Twilight finishing Star Swirl's spell and magical mystery cure, and having all the main six kind of use that as a defense for her, and have Twilight say that as well. It was nice kind of hearing that used as sort of a point in this episode.
I just hope they don't use it as a stick to beat it with.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Sorry, you go ahead, Mr. Bennis.
I was just saying that in Star Swirl meets Twilight and doesn't even notice the fact that she's an Alicorn princess and just dismisses her completely out of hoof.
Like, she's not a real good Alicorn princess if she was, you know, stupid enough to free us. I think he kind of come at the beginning there, just completely discredited Twilight because of what she did there.
To be fair, she didn't completely think things through. They basically
Well, I mean,
When
exactly.
does she ever think things through?
we can bring the pillars back, but they don't think to themselves, oh, hang on a minute. They kind of also got rid of the Pony of Shadows. That means that he might be. Oh shit! Fuck.
Well, yeah, and that's why Star Swirl was having such a negative perception of Twilight there, regardless of she's an Alicorn or not, is because she didn't think that stuff through and released all of them and the Pony of Shadows, and pretty much undid everything that they worked and sacrificed themselves to do.
It's a case of she may have ability, but if without the wherewithal or the thought processes, it's kind of worthless. It'd be like having a really, really great athlete that's incredibly athletic, but if they don't have the technical skill, what's the point?
And I think
that's kind of how Star Swirl was feeling about that.
And I think Twilight could have seen that coming. I mean, obviously, Starlight saw it coming and was trying to kind of warn her that maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe they knew what they were doing and stuff. But Twilight was just so blinded by the opportunity to bring her biggest idol back, that she was just overlooking that so much because of that. And speaking of Starlight, just a really great use of her in this episode as well. In trying to work things, having her be in the story to try and work things out with the villain and trying to get the whole picture, doing some investigative work, trying to get both sides of the story, trying to see why Stygian, the Pony of Shadows, kind of did what he did, based on her own past, and bringing that to the team. She just kind of brings a nice new dynamic to the team. She's bringing something here that the rest of the main six, and especially Twilight, just don't have. This perspective of being someone who was like that in the past and who was giving a second chance. And then, of course, kind of put it on the other side of the fence. They're having Star Swirl being just the complete opposite and just saying, no one can do that. You can't just talk things through. You don't want to give this guy a second chance. He obviously doesn't have any side of the story to tell there. And I just really liked that use of Starlight here in an episode that had so many characters and had a lot of involvement around Star Swirl and Twilight. Starlight had just a really good, important part that didn't take over the whole episode either, but it was such an important part in where the episode went.
Yeah, I mean, just mention Tim saying there about how there's obviously some people will rage that Starlight's being a Mary Sue by saving the day. Thing is, though, she doesn't save the day. She's essentially the voice of caution, but she doesn't save the day is saved essentially by everyone. Really, it's not just a one pony thing. Essentially,
I still don't understand how anyone can call Starlight a freaking Mary Sue unless they don't know what a Mary Sue is, because it's.
The thing is, though, she emphasizes with the villain. He was a villain before because essentially she messed up.
I just don't see how anyone. I mean, because this goes beyond this episode. People have been calling her that for a while now. Where you have a pony here that messes up in pretty much every episode that she comes in, and has so many flaws and so much baggage and stuff based on her past. She's like the opposite of a Mary Sue. I just don't understand how anyone could call her that. And in this episode here, she's being the voice of reason, and the only reason she's being that voice of reason is because of her past and what we know continuity about her and where she came from. It makes perfect sense that she would be the one that said, hey, maybe we should give this guy a chance or see what this side of the story is, because we don't know anything about we don't know anything about the Pony of Shadows or the pony that that formed him, besides what's the basic stuff that Star Swirl has written in his book. And it was a very logical thing to do. I don't see how anything here is a Mary Sue. People just throw that term around.
It's very much in the case of this story of history being written by the winners, although in a sense winning here was not really a winning move. It was more a containment move, really. It was more like a stalemate more than anything else.
Pretty much, yeah. It's just a stalemate that would last forever to save Equestria.
Or to essentially save Equestria in their view, obviously, because they never really talked it out with Stygian. Is why this all happened in the first place. And really and truthfully, the pillars' downfall was of their own making. Essentially, it was their own lack of being able to
their lack of friendship.
They have the skills that the bearers have, but they don't necessarily have the cohesion that they have with there's like no glue that binds them together, and the glue that binds the main six together is their friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the it's like basically having the difference between going out and it's say if you were working, just as an example, in the military, the reason why the military has so many opportunities for bonding between each soldier or each potential recruit or whatever is they need to then be able to be essentially a band of brothers or sisters and be a group with friendships and stuff like that, because with friendships you are stronger as a unit. If you are just there essentially doing your job and you're only looking out for each other because essentially that is a part of your job, it becomes a lot harder to become the elements that they have is much more specific than what the main six have, and because they're much more specific, it's a lot harder to introduce those things to others that are not necessarily your friends. And because they don't have the friendship, and they only, by the looks of things, the pillars were only brought together in times of dire need, essentially. Whereas, the main six will hang out with each other even if there is no crisis going on. I think that's the key difference between the two sets of ponies here. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the pillars evolve, as obviously they'll be introduced to the concepts of friendship, obviously via the main six and probably other ponies in Equestria. So that'll be really fascinating to see what happens sort of going forward with them and that.
It's kind of one of the things that the story seems to mention is that Stygian was the one who sort of brought them together. Like they mentioned that Stygian kind of recognized that this world was going to need a group of heroes to protect it from stuff like the sirens. This was, I believe, back in that flashback there. And so he was the one who sort of brought them together and planned out strategy and did all this other stuff sort of for them. So they could fight evil. So it was almost like they were each individual heroes in their own right, and Stygian was the one who brought them all together, which is, of course, very different from the main six, who is kind of a group of friends who then is able to all embody the elements and utilize, friendship and magic itself to sort of protect Equestria and spread more light and friendship across more of Equestria, rather than just sort of passively protecting it like the old pillars did. Yeah, that's a good point, Klaatu. And that pretty much what this episode focuses on with Starscreal so much is how he is sorcery. He isn't magic, which is friendship. He is sorcery. He is the magical power of like Twilight, but without that friendship for it. The one final thing that I had about the story was I just really liked kind of sort of Stygian's story and sort of like how the Pony of Shadows sort of came to be from him, and I really like how the episode presents it. They really concluded it really well too. They kind of concluded the whole problem of the episode really nicely, sort of like making it almost a metaphor for depression and feeling rejected and stuff. And it really took all of them understanding, and it took Starscreal and the pillars really learning about what it means to be a friend and what friendship is, more than just being colleagues, to go in there and actively work to save him from that shadow. He couldn't do it himself. They all had to come together and save him from that. I really, really liked how that played out in the end. Yeah, because they didn't know what it was about, about friendship and stuff. They were just colleagues, so when one of their colleagues screwed up, they didn't try and figure out why or how he felt, what his problem was. They just pretty much fired him. which led to jealousy and rage and this depression that he gets himself into that leads him to become the Pony of Shadows. And it took that dialogue there at the end. It took Twilight, someone who understands friendship, to come in there and get him to talk about it and talk with him about what his problem was to eventually make them all realize that and go in there and save him from that. And I think that was one of my favorite parts about that is it wasn't like Twilight just goes in there and talks to him and Stygian decides, oh, okay, I'm good with that. It isn't like what happened with Starlight. He was so caught up in this that it really took his words hitting the rest of the pillars and Starswirl saying no, actually finally getting him saying no, we actually have to save him. It took all of them coming together to be able to save him from the Pony of Shadows rather than him saving himself. I think it was a really good sort of metaphor for depression and how friendship is sort of an important part and can be an important part in overcoming that.
Something that I think that just before we move away from that,
sure.
Can I just say how incredibly good this show is to much more complex issues like that, but do it in a way that's, it's easier for kids to understand, but also you can see the more complex issues that they are trying to bring up. Mm-hmm. And I think that the show does that wonderfully well here, and it's something that I think the show doesn't get enough praise for because it does it with other issues as well. And
the tank episode.
It doesn't over egg the issues. It doesn't beat you around the head over those issues. It puts them there and makes you talk about them. And it's just amazing that it's just a much more adult way of doing it, and you just don't see that in shows that are supposed to be, are meant to be aimed at adults, or when you see it, it's done in such a ham-fisted way.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, another good example of that would be like Tanks for the Memories, dealing with sort of death in that without actually it being a death, and that did that in such a good way. Such great writing in that episode to deal with that.
Sometimes having limitations breeds more creativity.
Yep.
Having the limitation of being aimed towards kids and having an age rating essentially can make you be more creative, and being more creative normally brings up better ideas, and bringing up better ideas normally brings up better storytelling and lots of other things.
So, since we spent so much time on the writing, I think we should probably go ahead to the characterization and the character discussion. So, what did everyone think about the characters and the characterization in the episode?
This is going to take probably just as long.
Maybe so many just characters to cover.
And so many characters to cover, full stop. I think I'm going to start with Sunburst. Just to be, because everyone was probably thinking I was going to say someone like Twilight or something, but no, there's not a huge amount we have here with Sunburst, but what I do like is he is the one that instigates that, and in a sense you could say that he has the kind of Gideon kind of role here of basically bringing everyone together to obviously find out about this. But unlike say with obviously the Pony of Shadows, you have someone that that they are already friendly with, and it's essentially a case of being the catalyst for what is to come. Mm. Also, he's such a fucking nerd that I love him. I really do. Yeah, I'm expecting lots of study sessions with Twilight. I think we have a new ship to move over Flash.
Of course, it also helps that that the previous episode leading into this one, featuring him heavily with it, and having him get that book at the end. I think that really helped his appearance in this episode. If we didn't have that episode and he just kind of appeared at the the beginning of this episode reading this book that he just happened to. Yeah, if he just appeared like he did at the beginning of this episode, reading that book, and he's like, "Yeah, this is the book I found," it wouldn't have been as impactful. It wouldn't have been as good. It would have been more out of left field than if we had not had that episode prior. So it was a really good episode, a good use of having another episode leading into the finale. One of the things I kind of want to start out with here discussing is, and something we've hinted on a little bit, but I think it's one of the most interesting things character-wise here, is how this episode sort of role reverses Twilight and Starlight, with the latter sort of being the voice of reason against recklessly using magic here, when of course Starlight is the one who has a history of sort of recklessly using magic to solve problems.
Note that the only 2 times Starlight uses magic is essentially to help Twilight force the Pony of Shadows back. Essentially, she was only using it because she absolutely had to. Note that at no other point was she using magic for, in essentially to fight off the Pony of Shadows in any way whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Which, I thought was quite a fascinating turnaround when you consider that. Remember, with Starlight, she seemed to feel that magic was sort of like the solution to all of her problems, or she could use magic to solve all of her problems. And here, she hardly uses it at all.
Yeah, and it made sense in the context of this episode here why this role reversal happened. It all has to do with Twilight finally getting a chance to sort of meet, and then eventually meeting her biggest idol there. So it would totally make sense for Twilight based upon what we know about her, one of her biggest characterizations of this series, and that's her obsession with Star Swirl. I mean, that's something that's been apparent for the entire series, is how obsessed she is with Star Swirl. And so it was a good catalyst for sort of having this role reversal in this episode, which helps build Starlight's character as well, and seeing how she has grown thanks to Twilight.
It's almost a sort of a case of, it's similar to sort of Rainbow's Wonderbolts moment in a sense, when she finally gets to meet her heroes. Sometimes, like Twilight says at the end of the episode, you kind of forget who you are when you're in awe like that, and you end up trying to sort of imitate something that you're not. You're trying to imitate what you would consider an idolized version of someone, when that actual person or pony, in the case of this show, is not like that at all, or not necessarily always like that. Mm-hmm. You have a kind of a biased opinion of something, and it's normally from a biased viewpoint as well, because the only way she's found out about Star Swirl the Bearded is by essentially reading Star Swirl the Bearded's work.
Yeah.
That's a very biased way of finding out about someone.
Mm-hmm. And of course, here we finally get an appearance of Star Swirl here, and he's pretty much a dick. Very, very self-centered, very close-minded kind of person. Very opposite of Twilight in terms of not being interested in any sort of friendship at all. It was definitely very interesting characterization.
You could say it's not unlike Twilight, and in the season premiere. Essentially, it's not a million miles removed from that. But when Twilight opened up herself to friendship, when she moved to Ponyville, Star Swirl never did that. He always had a very stern, sort of militaristic sort of outlook of we do these things because they need to be done kind of attitude.
But at the same time, I think there's still a difference. I don't think Twilight was anywhere near as much of a dick as Star Swirl winds up being in this episode.
No, but I don't think Star Swirl is a dick, as in he's doing it out of malice in a sense. I think it's just how he is and how he's always been.
It's still a dick. I mean, that's still being a dick. I mean, how he treats Twilight in the episode, a lot of the thing is really dickish. Whether it's not doing it out of malice, he's still doing it out of just a sense of not caring about others and
his own self-importance. His duty, his duty is to the preservation of Equestria, and basically damn anything else: friendship, other ponies' feelings, other ponies' ideas, just anything that's basically to the preservation of Equestria is to the greater good, and anything else is just not important to him.
But not even more than that, because it's just like what he thinks is, it's not even just looking out for the greater
Yeah,
good.
it's
That's
a very,
what he
he's
thinks,
very hard-headed as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
also, he's not. Basically, if the other pillars essentially came up with ideas themselves, I get the feeling that he would probably swish them away as well. So yeah, I see where you're coming from.
And speaking of the other pillars, I mean, it's great to just not only see each of them again after we got little glimpses of them in the past 3 episodes this season where they were featured, but having them each get more screen time and some dialogue and interaction with the main 6. It's for having so many of them and the main 6 in this episode. I think each of them got a nice little bit of time to kind of show us their character and what they're all about. And each of them got some great screen time in the episode. And Josh, just so many returning characters in both of these episodes. All of the legends, Star Swirl, Sunburst, the dragons and Garble, Cattail, Daring Do. It's crazy how many characters were featured in this episode.
I do love how Fluttershy ends up helping, even though he was going to give it to her anyway.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's just great. It's just what I love about each of these little like vignettes of them getting the stuff. Essentially, the side quests, or the individual missions, you could say, of them getting these items.
Mm-hmm.
What I love is just how in keeping to the character of the characters they are for the show and what they do to actually procure these items.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fantastic, and I really feel that Spike needs an element. I think he's earned it at this point. Yeah, the element of winning by Luigi, by being like Luigi. Winning by doing nothing. He winning by face planting.
Well, it's funny. It's kind of an interesting thing to look at, because if you look at the original book, there were 7 sort of elements on there, with one of them being sort of probably revolving around Stygian. In addition to that, so you can kind of see like a similarity here between Stygian's role in the Old Pillars of Equestria and Spike's role in the main 6, where Stygian is sort of Spike in their world, but a Spike that didn't have that good relationship with Star Swirl, and Spike in a group that wasn't really all about friendship and more just about sort of saving Equestria. And it's kind of an interesting comparison to make, sort of like how Stygian is sort of Spike if he was in this role without those good relationships with the rest of the main 6, and how you could potentially see Spike feeling left out.
You can imagine how dangerous that would be because Spike could then become greedy and then become an adult dragon, quickly, and that would cause all sorts of problems for Equestria.
Yeah. And of course, you can kind of see if Spike, being that sort of 7th element, because he does have a chair at the map as well. I did create a smaller chair for him. So it's kind of, you can definitely see those parallels there between him and Stygian. And I think that's sort of what Stygian is representing in terms of their group dynamic versus the main 6's group dynamic.
It's not exactly the same. He obviously became hatched because of events pertaining to the main 6, so his link with them is still pretty strong, but he didn't necessarily bring them together per se, but he is still an integral part of the group, I would say. So whilst it's not like exactly the same, I can see where you're coming from. And
you also have to see that
you
also have to see that Spike also was the one that was trying to push Twilight to open up more in the opening episode as well. He was a lot more for that, and Twilight was trying to resist it. So you can kind of see that maybe a little bit as him bringing them together.
It's not something that they've really shown in the show, but I'd like to think that it's something that he sort of had via osmosis of constantly hearing Celestia mention about it to Twilight, that he's essentially he's cotton on to it because let's get this out in the open. Spike is not a he is a very intelligent young dragon. He is not thick by any means, and I think he in many ways he's a lot more socially adept than Twilight is, at least from what I can see, and especially early on in the show. And I feel that Spike has, like you say, because of his relationship with Twilight being so close. I think that the chances of that happening was probably slim. But like you say, I can definitely see that some kind of villainous nature could come from Spike if he was cast aside. In the same way that Stygian was.
Hey, look at what happened in All's Well That Ends Well.
Yeah.
Pretty much that was him feeling like he was being casted aside, and he kind of turned into a villain.
Are you logicking? Did you just logic All's Well That Ends Well to make sense?
I know.
That's amazing.
I think this episode might retroactively make that episode better. Somehow.
Wow. This episode... The season finale is so good that it actually makes one of the few episodes that I know Rain Shadow doesn't like actually to be better. That's how good this season finale is.
Yeah.
I honestly feel that they're fumbling around, not really knowing what to do with Spike, and it took them a while to actually get him into a position where they actually got him, where we are now. But hey, I would rather them get to this point eventually than never at all. So,
moving on to some other characters, one of the ones of the main 6 that are featured in the episode, besides Twilight, one of the other ones I really like to see was Rainbow Dash and kind of her part with Spike. We already kind of talked about having her and Spike in a part of the episode was really cool and something we hadn't really seen before. But it was just cool seeing Rainbow Dash actually being clever and sort of outsmarting Garble rather than trying to just race him. It was something that was a little bit different for her character, and it was really cool to see that.
It's proof that how much Rainbow Dash has learned as well, though, that she doesn't have to because normally if there was a fight to pick, she would normally pick them and essentially, to basically honour her friends. Think about it in the sense of how she even got her cutie mark in the first place. She only entered that race because Fluttershy was being picked on, essentially. And, she picked her fights. But perhaps in the past, Rainbow Dash would always pick a fight even if she was not necessarily going to win. I mean, a good example of that would be Dragonshy, where she picks that fight with the dragon, which is not exactly the smartest of moves when you're a little pony and you're up against a massive adult dragon. Whereas I think now Rainbow Dash has obviously matured, and I think in that sense, I think as one of the characters, she's one of the ones that's matured perhaps the most, and of sort of all of the main 6. And I think this shows her maturity, that she's not picking a fight that she knows that she may not necessarily win. And essentially, he was dumb enough to leave the prize just sitting there waiting to be taken. It was a case of, well, I'll just take it then.
Yeah, but more than that, she actively made him put that down. Like she got into his head and said, well, you're going to be at a big disadvantage if you have that, shield on there. It wasn't like he just put it down and she took advantage of it. She actively made him do
brains,
that.
Which that might be the first time I've ever seen Rainbow Dash do that, and it's actually kind of really cool to see.
What an egghead.
It's a big no. It's the thing is though, she's fleet of foot and a fast flyer, so it makes perfect sense for her to be a fast thinker as well. Yeah. And I think that's a really cool concept to bring into there.
Yep.
I just had to admit that I've I'm laughing along with Tim here in the chat room that Rainbow doesn't even bother to just go at it with her usual bravado. She just basically just bypasses the challenge altogether. She effectively tricks Garble into giving up the shield and then just effectively shanghais it like a boss.
And can I also just mention how much I loved her sticking up for Spike there, and sort of like, and how she sort of like logics away where Garble was like, "Guys, you just tumbled down the mountain. That's it." And she's like, "Well, if all he did was tumble down the mountain and he still beat you." And it's just like, oh man, just wrecked there.
She's learned her sick burns from Applejack.
Well, where was that animated picture of the I'm gonna have to look this up here.
I still think she would have won though if she would have gone up against him, but she didn't even have to.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. It's basically it's a case of she may well have been able to beat him, no problem, but it's a case of picking your fights and when you need to, and she didn't need to because Garble is dumb as a bag of rocks. I mean, the fact that you can be outsmarted by Rainbow Dash, it kind of puts you pretty low on the food chain in terms of intelligence, really.
I'm
That's not saying that Rainbow Dash is stupid, but out of the main six, she's not like the brainiest, let's say.
I'd have to agree with what Klaatu said there in chat too as well. Like feeling that's sort of like a daring do move there as well. I agree, and maybe something she picked up a lot from actually reading the daring do books as well in terms of using your smarts and your wits to overcome an enemy. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I can't believe we actually saw Daring Do in this episode as well. It's again all these characters from this season.
That's crazy.
Come back.
Oh, Pinky in that though. Oh
yeah.
God. It's like this thing was blocking. Oh, it's the thing I need.
It was also really nice to see a little bit more Starlight and Spike interaction here when Starlight starts to do that that investigation and to try and find out more information on Stygian and the Pony of Shadows. It was nice to have that little scene with them. I've always liked Starlight and Spike's interaction ever since the season 6 premiere, and it's something I always want to see more of because they have a good dynamic together, I think. Yeah, exactly. Like the way Tim is saying in chat, they even had Starlight and Spike. It's like all these things they had in this episode. They somehow made all of these things fit into it and have all these things in this episode going on without it.
And it still worked.
Yeah.
It didn't feel there was a lot going on. It was a very dense and tightly packed episode, but the amazing thing about it is it didn't feel rushed. I think it helps that obviously we had a lot of things explained in previous episodes.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is the advantage of the show has over the movie, whereas the movie has to essentially establish, set up, and acclimatize, and finally finish off in only an hour and a half. Really and truthfully, the show has much longer than that to be able to do that. And while the finale, you say, is only 44 minutes. Yeah, it's only 44 minutes, but it uses every second of those 44 minutes for the story. And also, it's not just using those 44 minutes. It's using several previous episodes as well. At least 5, maybe more. And that's, you're now getting into sort of several a couple of good couple or maybe even more hours of content that essentially are used to set this up. And that's essentially you're when you're building yourself up for such a foundation, and the foundation was as solid as they made it, it's kind of sort of no wonder that the story, while still incredibly dense, it flowed incredibly well by doing so.
I think that's one of the reasons why this episode felt so much like I felt a lot better than a lot of other two-parter episodes. Is because a lot of two-parters in this series are really good, but they're also almost completely self-contained as well, where they don't build upon a lot of stuff from the seasons. There's only very few episodes like the season 4 finale and stuff like that, where they actively are pretty much where they're not actively self-contained, where everything has to be introduced, everything has to do
with based around the premiere, but only really the premiere and not much else.
But yeah, so what I'm saying is so all those episodes have to kind of introduce all of these concepts and characters. Anything that's in the episode has to be done within the episode. And whereas this episode was pretty much telling a story with stuff that has all been set up previously. So we have all the episodes that introduced the legends in this, and we of course know a lot about Star Swirl. We have all these characters, a ton of characters featured in this episode, but next to none of them, with the exception of the Pony of Shadows and a little bit of and some of Star Swirl's personality, have to be actively set up in this episode. all of the legends had their own stories and episodes with them. We don't have to do any introductions for them. We don't have to do any introductions for Daring Do or the Main Six or Starlight or Sunburst or in this episode. We don't have to know why Sunburst is in this episode. We don't have to know why the Star Swirl's book is in this episode. All this stuff has been set up previously this season, and so this episode is just able to take everything that's been set up and make an awesome story with it. Don't have to have all of this exposition and reasoning to get all these characters in here. We know why they're here. All we need to do is focus on characterizing Star Swirl and characterizing the Pony of Shadows, and that's it. And I think that's one of the reasons why this episode was so successful story-wise. And it's something that has really been getting stronger and stronger every season in terms of the show's use of continuity. And this season has really blown me away with how much more it's amped it up. One of the other things I really liked character-wise was I really liked having that part where the main six all stuck up for Twilight when Star Swirl wouldn't even consider her spell, and they give all these reasons why, she pretty much finished one of your spells and stuff like that. I really liked that moment of the episode there. Again, showing how this difference in group dynamic between the main six and between the pillars of Equestria, where the pillars seem to be all sort of co-workers or colleagues that help each other out in these fights, but don't really actually necessarily care for each other. Whereas the main six, here they are, they're more than just this group of coworkers or this group of superheroes saving the world. They're all actively really close friends, and so to see them all kind of get behind Twilight in that moment was a nice signifier of that.
Yeah, it's nice to see them. They will stick up for each other. Even though, it's interesting. An episode this season that got a lot of flack was M.A. Larson's episode this season, and whilst Larson himself is not necessarily happy with everything that happened in that episode, I think A, he's doing himself and the episode a disservice, but B, it's amazing how it shows that each character is still inherently flawed, but the fact that they look out for each other is what helps make them stronger in the end.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I think the show really should tap into, because I think it really does work really well, especially here.
Yeah.
Almost like none of them are Mary Sue's at all, but what do I know?
Everyone's a Mary Sue.
Yeah, especially me. I mean, that's my secret real name. It's Matthew Mary Sue Howard.
Isn't Mary is just a short name for Matthew, right? So, yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know how you spell Mary over there, then. I think that's a bit of a stretch.
One of the other things I really enjoyed about the pillars themselves is it was nice to have some new male protagonists as well in the series. It's nice to have. I have no problem with this series being really majority female. It's nice to have in a show, but it is still nice to have more male protagonists as well in the show, especially with it trying to the show and the toy line actively trying to kind of be more gender neutral and speak more to both genders as well.
It's more people for Discord, Big Macs, and Spike's Dude Nights.
Yeah, exactly. But the pillars have a really nice composition of members as well. They have 3 male, 3 female, and 2 of each race, just like the original main 6 had, which was really cool. A really interesting observation that I had when I was rewatching the episode, though, each of the pillars match the pony race of their main 6 counterpart, with Applejack and Rocco for both Earth ponies, etc. With the exception of Sonambula and Pinky and Meadowbrook and Fluttershy. Sonambula being obviously being related to Pinky, but she is a Pegasus. Meadowbrook being related to Fluttershy, but she is an Earth pony. And this is really interesting because, of course, in Friendship is Magic's original development before the show went on air, Pinky used to be a Pegasus and Fluttershy used to be an Earth pony. That was switched, in the development process. But originally, Lauren Faust had Pinky being a Pegasus and Fluttershy being an Earth pony. So it's kind of
it's kind of cool to have
So it's kind of cool to have this like reference to like the old characters in these quote old characters of the show. Like here we have like the old main six, and you know, one that's Pinky is a Pegasus, and the one that's Fluttershy is an Earth Pony. I thought it was whether intentional or not. It seems like it might be, and I think it's a really cool reference.
Yeah, I mean, it's because obviously Fluttershy was based on the Generation 2 pony Posey, who was obviously an Earth Pony, and then obviously you have Pinky, who was Eyes, who was, I believe, a G1 pony. I might be wrong on that. But yeah, who was obviously a Pegasus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and obviously that was why they were originally. I mean, obviously originally Pinkie Pie was going to be voiced by Tara. So it's fascinating to see how the show had those original plans gone through. But in a sense, I think the decisions they only, well, here we are still 7 years later, still gushing.
It's kind of off topic. It's kind of funny that you mentioned in Terra Strong originally wanting to voice Pinky. Just wait till we show Unikitty this Saturday, and then we can get an idea of what Terra voice Pinky would have said.
I don't want to hear that again. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that show again. Oh, Matt and I have both watched it, and we've already had a discussion.
The thing is, though, I'm going to be very brief. I honestly thought that it was better than I feared it would be, but yeah, they really need to tone Tara down in the show.
The voice direction was not great. Yeah.
Not with her. I mean, the other characters were fine. In fact, both characters voiced by Roger Craig Smith were probably the best in the show, which kind of says a lot. And Sonic the Hedgehog is your best character, you know.
I think the final note I had on characters was I really did like kind of Star Swirl's arc in this, and sort of his realization at the end. I mean, if he sort of realizes the mistake he made when he actually takes a second to listen to what Stygian is saying, and you kind of see that look in his eyes when he hears what Stygian is saying, like, oh, I fucked up. That kind of look. But it's a really nice turnaround with him, and I really like the moment where, you know, they're fighting to bring Stygian out of this darkness, and Star Swirl finally just steps up and says, "Well, come on, everyone, we gotta help him. We gotta help our friend." And it was just a really nice sort of arc for him in this episode as well, and seeing how Twilight of all people has helped him out. You know, her like biggest idol helped him out in terms of building his character.
I just get the feeling whenever she's going to be around Star Swirl, though, she's just going to be utterly adorable.
Yeah. I really like that, and the end of the episode was great. You know, when he's finally meeting with Celestia and Luna there, but the comments he makes there involving, you know, Twilight, and she kind of like really tears up. That was a really nice emotional moment though for Twilight's character there, and then she kind of goes ahead and pays that emotion forward to Starlight as well, saying, you know, like I wouldn't have, you know, been here, you know, and you know, if my protege, if I didn't have such a great like student as well. Kind of paying that forward from Celestia to Twilight, then Twilight to Starlight. It was really nice moments at the end of the episode there. And yeah, I guess the final thing that I have for characters and story is just the implications that this episode has. I mean, just in the repercussions that it has going forward. Again, potentially changing some dynamics of the show with. Now Star Swirl and the Pillars are now here. They're alive and in the present series. It's like I wasn't expecting that to happen at the end of the episode. I was expecting them to somehow either sacrifice themselves or disappear, or something would happen that would, you know, kind of return that status quo back, you know, and they wouldn't be there. But no, they're all here. All 7 of them, including Stygian, are still here now in the show going forward, and have the potential to maybe appear again and impact the show. And it's going to be really interesting to see if and how they're used going forward.
I like the fact that Star Swirl essentially says that whilst he may well teach speech again at the School for Gifted Unicorns. He says that he wants to explore around Equestria as it is now. He basically wants to go on his own odyssey, maybe.
Boo. Mario the... I guess it's not Mario the Beard, it's Mario the Mustached.
Mario the Mustachio Dude. I'm now just imagining Starswell with it being possessed by Cappy and Mario now. That's not a good thought.
No, instead of Cappy, he has Beardy. He throws his beard.
God.
Anything I didn't really specifically talk about Stengian either, but I really liked his character in this. How he was portrayed.
I find it's interesting how he deals with how the show deals with the negativity of rejection essentially. And like you say, the fact that the connotations to depression there, and the fact that they for a show that's based for the audience that it is, and all of the preconceptions that many people still have about the show, the fact that we're actually talking about the fact that something as complex and serious and as grown up as depression is, it's the fact that the show not only handles it but handles it in probably the best way that it possibly could. I think is it's a testament to the show and its writing, and the fact that they can bring these characters in and have these complex flaws, not necessarily flaws, but complex intricacies of who they are. I can't praise the episode and show enough that they can do this, and they do this in such a way that not only works, but it works for everyone to enjoy, but also to understand, and that you can discuss these things with your child, and you never know that it might actually bring something positive to the table and help enrich that someone's life from it. And I can't really think of too many shows that actually provide that and give the opportunities for that. There's not very many. It's a very special thing.
Okay,
indeed.
Sorry.
Yeah, Matt.
Somebody was yelling. Not you, Matt. Somebody was yelling at me.
Okay.
Some guy was yelling at me. I got some girl in the back was yelling
damn it,
at me, and I didn't mute it. I gotta get going.
That was brilliant.
Damn it, Little John. Yeah.
It's crazy though, because really of all the great animated shows that have been on TV the past 7 years now, because it really has been just a big renaissance in television animation and the quality of it the past 7 years. It's funny that I really do consider MLP to be sort of the best in terms of this sort of continuity and story progression and development and how it handles these things. And this episode just, for me, it just blows out of the water so many other animated series' writing that I've seen, really good animated series, but it somehow this show is just so great at continuity and the writing and the development and pushing things forward in it. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it doesn't get the credit it really deserves for it. You hear a lot of other animated shows getting a lot of positive press and praise and stuff for a lot of their writing and the stories they undertake, but you just don't hear that for MLP, just based on the stigma the show has with the title, and most of the time, if there's a story on Pony, it more focuses on, oh my god, guys like it. It's okay, so and it's unfortunate because you get episodes like this and just and seasons like this and the world building that this show has, and its 7th season now, and it's just amazing how great it is, and it really deserves a lot more attention the show itself deserves a lot more attention than it does get.
This is because this is something we've actually discussed privately before this episode. My view on this is a very simple one, though. Is if people are wanting to disregard it, then really it's their loss. you know. And ultimately, I'm not going to force the show on anyone because ultimately, I'm not that sort of person. I mean, I barely mention I'm like a huge fan of the show, like outside of like here, really, because it never really comes up in conversation more than anything. But you know, I'm you know, there's, you know, you could say, oh well, are you worried about how people feel about it? No, I don't really care. I mean, if people want, you can think what they like about what I like, but you know, it's more a case of, you know, I feel that the show is underappreciated to an extent, but it's ultimately it's hamstrung partly, obviously, being on a channel in America that's not easily received. But obviously, we use that excuse, but you're kind of forgetting, you know, other countries, like here in the UK, for example, it's on a channel that's actually, you know, free to air, essentially, although some areas have it easier getting it than others, because I actually can't get Tiny Pop at the moment because it's been moved around on the Freeview mix, but I actually do have FreeSat, for example, which means I can still get the channel, but only downstairs in like my living room. But you know, access is partly the issue, but obviously, you know, the fact that it's ostensibly about, you know, My Little Pony,
the name,
people, you know, ultimately have the fear, you know, it's like, oh, it's that franchise. You know, we all have a franchise that we think to ourselves, oh, I wouldn't really want to watch that. It's like saying something's Care Bears. I ultimately, you think to yourself, that's not really gonna be for me, or you know, that my time of me enjoying that has long since passed. You don't think to yourselves, oh, maybe the show is going to be that. I mean, it's you know, it's pure happenstance and chance that I even really watched the show or even gave it a chance, you know. And I think that's how a lot of people are going to stumble onto this show. And while that's not necessarily ideal, ultimately the fact that the show is still going 7 years later means that A, must be doing something right, and B, that they must be getting enough people, you know, to be watching and appreciating the show for it to continue for as long as it has.
Yeah. Anything else for
go ahead. No, it's fine.
I was just going to conclude. I was just going to conclude stuff. I was just going to say, is anyone else have anything they want to mention for story or characters before we move on, because we have been talking about them for 2 hours now. So I just want any final points before we move on.
I personally can't think of anything. You all pretty much have kind of, you know, covered everything. Yeah.
There was a lot to talk about though in this episode. It's even more than previous like two-parters. Really just says a lot about this two-parter and stuff, and it really, you know, if Nicole's going to be more active in the series going forward, this episode makes me all for it. You know, with what her and Haber have delivered in it have been just fantastic.
Please don't make them any more dense, these episodes, otherwise we'll be talking about them for like 17 days.
Oh, just wait for the season 8 premiere. Oh boy.
Oh my god, that season 60 finale, we'll be talking about it for 20 weeks.
Oh man, oh gosh, it's been 2 minutes. I've got to get up and go to the bathroom again, guys. Sorry. Bladder isn't what it used to be.
I'll just be actually on the toilet when I'm doing the episodes.
I'll have to start wearing diapers to Triple E.
Don't.
Thanks for the unnecessary mental image.
Gosh.
That's an outfit I want for Mario, now for Odyssey.
Oh god. Oh god. Baby Mario outfit.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Oh, god. Okay, so moving on to the next point of discussion here, before we get boggled down in more stuff. The voice acting. So, Jesus, this episode had a lot of voice actors with all the characters. I mean, that's, if you look at the voice actor list for both episodes, especially that second part, it's like it fills up the entire screen. It's amazing how many voices they had in this episode. Yes. Everyone can cry. They didn't get Patrick Stewart to voice Star Swirl. Blah blah blah. I think Chris Britton did an absolutely freaking fantastic job with Star Swirl. I mean, like he killed that part. That is exactly how I wanted Star Swirl to sound, and he was just really great at it.
Tim. Perfect. I
Brilliant.
couldn't say it better myself.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean,
Hey,
Yeah,
let's
nice.
say if Patrick Stewart was more interested in getting a paycheck for saying 8 lines as an animated piece of shit, then we don't need him for the show. So
but to be truthful,
exactly.
the great thing I think about this is that it opens the opportunity for them to bring Starswirl back as a more recurring character. If it was voiced by Starswirl, if he was voiced by Patrick Stewart, then that would have kind of been hampered, or they would have had to get someone else anyway eventually. Here, it's someone that they can bring back and maybe voice this character in future episodes without having to pay a butt ton of money
The
for
show
it.
brings back Discord plenty enough times.
Yep.
So you never know, but yeah, it makes things a lot easier.
I think John DeLance is probably a lot cheaper of a voice actor to get than freaking Patrick Stewart would be.
And the fact that I think John actually actively likes coming back as well.
And I think that's the other big point, is this continues on their streak of not just bringing in voice actors just to bring them in. They really just bring in guest voice actors who have actively expressed an interest in the show and want to be there.
Yeah.
And I think it makes their guest appearances so much better than just paying Patrick Stewart a bunch of money to come in and voice a character he might know nothing about or care about or whatever, in a show he doesn't care about or never has watched before. Has Chris Britton done voice work in the show before? I can't remember. I looked this up and I can't remember.
He hasn't done it. I don't think he's done a great deal. It hasn't
been a lot, but I'm trying to remember.
It's not extensive.
I'm trying to remember if he's voiced anyone in the show before, though. I know we do have Bill Newton coming back again for voicing a third character this season after voicing Applejack's dad. He of course plays Stygian in the Pony of Shadows and does an absolutely fantastic job voicing both of them. I think one of my favorite voice acting parts with him was that transition they do with his voice and also the effects on his voice when Twilight is in the shadow itself and Stygian's talking, but he's slowly sort of, that anger is building back up and he's morphing back into that shadow. That voice transition they do between the two characters is so great and so like intense and intimidating.
It's it's not just with them, the Pillars. Well, they just got voice actors and actresses that not only either have experience of voice acting in for this sort of show, or they just basically chose the person that basically they obviously felt did the best job, and that's ultimately the most important thing here. It's a case that the show didn't just go for the. We were talking about it just earlier on that Tara Strong was originally brought on to be the voice of Pinkie Pie, and I think she would have done a splendid job at voicing her. I'm not going to say she wouldn't have done, but I think that the fact that they actually redid that, or Andrea Libman obviously blew them off the blew it out of the park when she did her what do you call it when they
Audition.
Yeah, when she obviously auditioned for the role, and they obviously. And I think the show is not it's not afraid of being able to pick the right that not necessarily pick the first person that they think would be the best for it, but they pick the best person based on what they actually hear.
Yeah.
And I think that's that shines, because how often have we actually when we've talked about voice acting in the show, how often have we said that there's been a bad vocal performance in the show? I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah,
I honestly don't think it's probably one of the greatest strengths of this show is the voice acting is fantastic.
They have a great cast, and
part
Terry
of that comes down.
Yeah, I was just saying. They have a really great cast and a really great voice director in Terry Klassen for it.
I mean, it's the fact that a lot of these people are extreme. I mean, Terry Klassen is hugely experienced now as well. I mean, he has actually done voice acting himself, which I think is a key thing in directing other voice actors, is that he has that experience of doing it himself. So, I think it really works. Actually, it's kind of funny that I don't think Terry's actually ever voiced a character in the show. I really think, even if it's just a minor role, he has he?
Yeah, he has. I forget which one. I have to look it up, but he has.
Yeah. I was going to say, but he hasn't had a huge amount. He's not had a huge amount of roles. But yeah, I mean, it's I really think he actually sort of deserves at least like a minor character at least.
Yep.
In the show.
And Tim, a good point of that is again Tara voicing Unikitty and the Unikitty show, which I think you should just they needed to. That's the point where voice directing really could have, and if you haven't seen it, when we see it, you will realize this. I think when voice directing would have been really important to kind of reel that in. It's like I think it's what makes Pinky a lot better in most of the time is that Andrew Libman can and has in the past kind of gone off the wall with Pinky in her voice, but I think usually that good voice direction helps from another perspective, a separate perspective from the voice actor to kind of reel that in.
If you want an example of not very good voice direction, we'll have an example of that on Saturday. Honestly, it disappoints me because I hate to say this, but Unikitty feels like Teen Titans Go kind of done right, and that's kind of terrifying to me to say that.
It's hard to say after one episode, but it definitely was
but
better.
It's also hard to say. Yeah, it's certainly something that I'm at least actively going to see how it goes from here on, because it could go one of either way. It can either become like as bad as TTG, or it could actually be something worthwhile, and hopefully it's going to be the latter.
So the app kind of cuts off because he's actually voiced quite a few people. He's voiced Hoops, Announcer, Annoyed Delicate, Waiter, Apple Split, Carriage Stallions, Young Hoops, and Igneous Rock. Oh yeah, he voices Pinkie Pie's dad. I forgot about that, and a whole bunch of other things. It gets cut off on IMDb here, so I can't.
It's too many. It's too many to count.
Yeah, but he does a great job with the voice acting. And with the voice direction in this series, regardless.
I think part of that's down to the great writing as well, though. He obviously, his job is made that much easier by having such great writing as well.
He's done voice director in a ton of things, both for DHX and other ones. He's done voice direction for a bunch of the Barbie stuff, which is why we see a lot of Barbie voice actors in the show. But a bunch of the other DHX ones, pretty much all the other DXX shows, including like Little's Pet Shop, he's done voice. Pac-Man. I mean, you'll see a lot of connections with different things. He's done voice direction for Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. We know William Anderson did the music for that. Martha Speaks. Dan Ingram's done stuff for that. He has a lot of connections with a lot of different things. He was a voice director for Ed and Eddie. So there's more
didn't everyone that worked on MLP work on Ed and Eddie at some point?
A lot of them did.
At least prior to season 5, anyway.
Ed and Eddie, there's Ed and Eddie.
Too much stuff.
Ton of Barbie stuff. Other stuff for Hasbro, Beyblade. Yeah, he's done a lot of voice directing, so he has a lot of experience and a lot of experience with the same cast here. So. Which is important. I can bring up the... one of the two voice directors from the movie. 70 episodes. Okay, so no, Chris Britton has only voiced Starswell. This was his first voice acting role in the show.
That just makes it all the more impressive, though. The fact that this is his first role. Let's just give him one of the biggest roles, that we've alluded to for only 100 episodes or so in this show. No biggie. It's fine.
Vincent Tong came back as Garble.
Ultimately, it's a case of he must have absolutely blown away in the auditioning for the role. So and it's kind of it kind of shows with how obviously that happened.
And we got Doran Bell came back for Cattail in the first part as well. Another returning. One of the cool things is we hear all the returning voice actors for the what's it called? For the Pillars of Equestria, but we also get some new ones because like Somnambula, I don't believe was voiced in her appearance in the Daring Dunn episode. So we actually do get Murray Peters voicing Somnambula in this episode here as well. So we do get some also additional new voice actors for the series.
I do have to admit, I really loved Somnambula's voice.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that Egyptian thing that she had going on with her voice.
Yep.
Considering the amount of fan art she's already had, it seems the fandom kind of really likes that kind of theme as well.
Yeah.
How would ponies build pyramids? They've only got hooves, though.
We also get Rockhoof was another one that wasn't voiced previously. So we get Matt Calrick, who voiced Rockhoof in this. He actually voiced the Dragon Lord Torch in Line of Fire in season 5 as well. So back for this episode then.
To get into a point, if you have every single character in the show in an episode, just imagine how long the voice acting list would be now.
Multiple pages. Like I said, this one was already almost filled up. It pretty much filled up the entire screen in the second part. But yeah, the voice acting in this was just great. Phil Noonan just does such a great job with what's his name, Sinjian. There's great work on that, and Bill and Starswell as well was really greatly voice acted. Moving on to humor. And this episode did have a little bit of humor on it, even though it was a lot more serious kind of story character episode. So, what did everyone think about the episode's humor?
Oh man, we had so much on that. God, just
Pinkie Pie liking apple butt.
Gosh,
she likes apple butt. And she cannot lie.
That image is never going to go away.
And then there's also the various fan edits on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Still think Fluttershy beats it, but I'm biased.
Twilight, of course, I think was a good source of a lot of humor here. Just all of her like really adorable fangirling throughout the episode. I like the part where they're walking in and Sunburst is like, it'll take years of study to understand Star Swirl's spell. I figured out Star Swirl's spell. And she gives like this excited snort. And then when she's explaining everything to the main six as well, and kind of going off the rails, fangirling about it, Rarity's just like, Twilight, darling, we understand you're excited, but that's all we understand.
Yeah. Took the words right out of my mouth on that.
Yeah, a lot of character humor in this episode.
Yeah,
which you don't understand considering the characters are sort of the key thing in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Those dioramas she made, and then she's like, I made more.
I made more. I love how incredibly excited she is because she's doing she's just like one of those kids that actively enjoys going to school.
She loves research.
She can't do research papers for Celestia now. She has to make her own work.
Say, of course, here, Technotron mentioning in chat room that expression that Twilight made when Star Swirl noticed her.
This comic.
Basically, the episode right there.
Yeah, Senpai noticed me.
I love that that comic that DM12's just posted. So are you gonna tell Twilight that's your shopping list? Nah. I
I really love Applejack. The scene with Applejack proving the archaeologist wrong when she kicks that boulder. I bet if you told some pony else this story, it might sound preposterous. It's just like that fucking sass in that comic was so great.
In my MLP.
That was such a great line, and Ashley Baldwin delivered that so great. Sassy Jack. Yeah, the Indiana Jones pony, and that one pony from earlier this season that the CMC helped that was into archaeology appeared in this episode as well in that scene, which was a nice little tiny bit of continuity there.
I like archaeology. It'll be almost like we end up. Hey, with those circular things of stones, they should have had that pony that's into circles there. Ponehenge.
Yeah.
Totally not Stonehenge. No, not at all. Which basically means Britain is canon in MLP now. Canon.
I thought it already was, and that's where Pip came from.
Pip. Yeah, I was just saying. Yeah, Pip obviously must come from near where she must come from around Hollow Shades or near to it.
Also, the Twilight line. I can't believe I'm going to meet Star Swirl the Bearded. Outside of my dreams. That's not touching that line.
I was just gonna say, and what are you doing in those dreams? Actually, probably nerdy research projects, knowing Twilight.
Speaking of nerdy research, I loved how she was like building all of those things of stone or ponehedge, I should say. She made a diorama.
Yeah.
Which in her excitement, she accidentally destroys, and she's like, "Don't worry, I've made more." Damn, girl, how many do you need?
I loved Rainbow calling. I loved Rainbow calling Star Swirl Beardo. Such a Rainbow thing to do.
Beardo.
Doesn't give a crap who he is.
I know we mentioned this, but when they were mentioning about, they kind of gave some crap on Starlight again. I was like the last time the map called all of us to one place was Starlight Village, so it's like a supervillain tracker. No offense. But then Starlight's reaction, kind of just to take Applejack's sort of unamused eyebrow stare. But what's doubly funny is the fact that if you consider a lot of the things is that a lot of times whenever someone mentioned no offense, none taken is usually the one that's said in response. But here Starlight doesn't say this. She takes all as much offense as she wants.
I also really like Pinky's magic.
Speaking of Pinky and kind of crapping on Starlight again, when she was like listing off all the stuff that they had to take care of, like Nightmare Moon, Sombra, or T-Rex and all that, when they actually she mentioned Starlight about how Starlight enslaved the village, she actually reaches over, pulls Starlight in on camera for her to kind of give like a sort of a sheepish smile and wave, only for Pinky to just unceremoniously shove her right back off the camera, right back out of frame. Just
you've served your usefulness. Now off with you.
I also liked in that same scene just Pinky's whole like series recap of the villains that they all defeated there.
It's the best way to learn about the show. Just have Pinky recap it in like 10 minutes.
yeah,
Also,
like
Applejack's line, begging your pardon, Mr. the Bearded. It's just all the different ways that we're...
So hang on. So if they were speaking to Sonic the Hedgehog, would they be calling him Mr. the Hedgehog?
Yes. Haven't they referred to him as that in one of the Sonic Boom episodes before?
I think they did.
Probably.
That's great.
If they haven't, it would certainly be something the show would do.
Yeah, I know that we also had whatchamacallit. I know Technotron is also mentioned as well, but I think we also mentioned it before, where we got a bit of a a throw off reference to the movie where like Spike's like saying, "Hey, well, this will help," and Twilight's all like, "Sea pony etiquette. This isn't gonna help."
Yeah. Also, at the end of the episode, when Twilight calls Star Swirl Swirl Star.
Say, we would be glad for you to learn from Star Swirl again, provided you don't want the essays we owed you before you disappeared.
Yeah, that scene between Celestia and Luna and Star Swirl was really good.
I get the feeling that Celestia and Luna were very, very naughty kids.
Naughty?
I just get that feeling. They were very naughty.
Star Swirl, it's garbage day.
Oh, the other image I've just thought of. I don't know if you can find it, but of Apple Derp.
Oh yeah, hold on. I had it right here. I was saving it. I was saving it for the
explaining all the nerdy stuff.
I was saving it for the animation discussion, so I got it.
But it's humor as well. It's relevant.
Here.
You know. I like that Sunburst was also excited, but he's a lot more reserved than Twilight is. Twilight's a lot more extrovert, whereas Sunburst is a little bit more introverted. Not massively so, but he's a lot more. Let's say he's a little bit more self-contained than what Twilight can be when she gets excited.
Yeah. Here and then disappeared. Oh. That apple dirt.
The intelligent ponies are talking. This is my default face, basically.
Yeah, on some of the animation and the visuals, they're just really great, and some funny things like that. There's a ton of faces. There's probably more eyebrow raises in this episode than any episode prior. There's quite a few of them. I know that Twilight also Twilight's Magic pointed out the pony rules written on the side of Ponehenge earlier in the episode.
See, even the graffiti in MLP is really nerdy.
Yeah. Rarity's cowgirl outfit was when they're meeting up in Manhattan there after they've gone to some sort of Appaloosa place was really, really good. Commenced the more Rare Jack shipping there. But yeah, some of the animation is at the end and regarding the Pony of Shadows and Stygian was just great. I mean, you got stuff like this with that stuff just that's not creepy at all. In that.
When the Pony of Shadows first appears, though, the animation for that, oh my god, that's just so good. I mean, just for something that's animated in Flash, this show does still surprise me with what they're able to actually achieve.
So here's that was the next thing I was going to bring up. The animation of the Pony of Shadows forming here. It's more or less just like traditional animation here. It's literally drawn frame by frame in terms of the effect and of him appearing and of him kind of expanding from that. It's all done just frame by frame. Just look at that thing until he finally morphs into his puppet character that they use for the rest of the episode there. Just that formation animation there is incredibly well done, and you've got to appreciate the work that went into that one little scene there of him appearing. All that stuff dripping down from the ball and expanding out like tentacles, and then kind of all morphing up into wings and a body, and just wow, that really is some of the best animation I've seen from the show right there.
And Flash is supposed to look absolutely shit.
Yeah.
It does if you don't put the effort in, like anything.
I also like the another instance of one of the ponies using their wing to kind of block their face when they're embarrassed, like you got here with Twilight. Embarrassed in front of.
You're gonna need more wings from Larson to hide that shame, Twilight.
lot of other great faces that Applejack, after she delivers that sassy line there, again with another eyebrow raise there, and that smug fucking look.
That's one smug apple.
Yeah. And of course, here's another excited fangirling Twilight here. Someone mentioned books.
Did someone mention Starswell the Bearded? Did someone mention Starswell the Bearded books? Honestly, who fangirls more now? Twilight Sparkle or Rainbow Dash? Who's the biggest fangirl? Fangirl wars. Starswell on the beard. What books that have all got beards on them? It is cool.
This episode just had some fantastic animation. Of course, all the new locations and all these characters and stuff that in the episode was just. Anything else for humor or animation before we?
A little bit of a blink and you'll miss it, I guess. I suppose. After the pillars defeat and banish the sirens, the whole town is celebrating and congratulating them. Major Meadowbrook is carried off by a few ponies, but you can see if you look that several ponies are struggling to carry Rocco at all due to his massive size.
Yeah, the Well of Shade, that was great. I loved when they're all standing there and the whole thing just kind of just collapses into the Well of Shade. There.
I'm guessing the whole of Equestria is breathing a huge sigh of relief that one of the bearers wasn't Woe Nelly.
Yeah, nice, yeah.
Yeah, and of course the sirens make another appearance there in their siren form. They're definitely a lot improved animation there versus when they were shown in Rainbow Rocks all those years ago. I just got to keep my fingers crossed that they're going to appear in one of the Equestria Girls series coming up. They got to appear again.
Oh yeah, when they're actually trying to obviously fight off the Pony of Shadows, some of the animation there was fantastic as well.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, so we've been here for like almost 3 hours, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to talk another 3 hours more about the music, so...
Only 3?
That's
showing restraint.
I'm trying to be...
Only 3.
Trying to be restrained here with... I really think that this is like... This is some of the best music in the series, I think, in this episode. And it's saying a lot, being that I think there's a lot of episodes this season that could qualify as having the best music in the series, whether that be from The Perfect Pair, with all the score and music involved in that episode, to some of the score involved in the Campfire Tales episode, specifically the Meadowbrook, that Meadowbrook part with the Asian-inspired score, was some of the best. But I really think this is the best score in a two-parter. In this episode, and again, some of the best of the series. Just some great themes, great use of themes, and a lot of great themes that are reoccurring throughout the episode here. Let's see if I'm gonna have to. Why is this being? I gotta open up my episode notes here so I can. Nice location design there when they're falling into the well. Yeah, but the music in this episode was great, and it's a lot too. I got like 27 tracks, and really almost none of them are worth like not mentioning, because all of them contain just some great score and some important uses of score for the episode. And the episode really doesn't waste any time, like right away, getting into this score. Oops, there we go. Right away from the beginning of the episode, when we're hearing the book and the story of the Pillars of Equestria, the episode just dives right into the good stuff here. Right away, in this first track here, we are given one of the episode's main motifs, which is a piano arpeggio, which is representing the pillars of old Equestria here, and this is the theme that we hear multiple times throughout the episode for those pillars. It's really reminiscent of the beginning score to Beauty and the Beast, which also featured an opening with some piano arpeggios and string backing. So it sounds very familiar with that. It's really just a beautiful way to begin the episode. The piano is backed with a full string ensemble as well as an oboe. And as Star Swirl continues to tell his final story here, the score changes from kind of lightly mysterious to more dark and sinister as he begins to talk about them going up against the Pony of Shadows. But the piano arpeggios continue throughout, and the track kind of ends where it began there. It's only the first track, but it's one of my favorite of the episode and one of my favorite themes of it. So here's this one. Then from there we go to the next track where Sunburst and Twilight are discussing with the princesses the book that they found. We hear more of that same motif from the first track there appearing throughout this track and blends with some other new score here as they continue to talk about the book. A bit of exciting music for Twilight here. Here we go. So this is a really nice thing here. This has like a little two-note ostinato repeating phrase on the piano here, and we'll hear this continued into the next track and a few other tracks as well. Keeping with that same motif there in the melody. This continues into the next track here, where Twilight and the group have done a ton of research, and they eventually stumble upon a clue, which Starlight helps to decipher in the episode. So this track continues that two-note ostinato motif that we heard in the previous track, And it really continues to give off this really mysterious, somewhat magical vibe that really fits with the tone of the episode. So the little kind of off-sounding woodblock music as they're all sleeping.
Music for me.
Here's that two-note ostinato here. That theme picks up again. It's a little bit more mysterious here. Continues to read what happened. Now we get to Ponehenge here. This is when they finally travel to Ponehenge. We continue with that piano arpeggio motif as they first arrive here, and the score continues its mysterious overtones as they continue to explore the ruins here, led by some woodwinds and a glockenspiel. Very mysterious sounding score here for this. This is going to lead directly into the next track here, which is the vision that the book starts to provide. And this might be my favorite track of the episode. It's hard to say, but I really like this. It blends the legend motif that we heard in the first track there with some other new motifs and blends them really well together. So the scene begins with the Pillars piano leitmotif that we heard at the beginning of the episode. Additional strings are brought in and begin to arpeggio up and down the scales as the scene scene intensifies and as the score intensifies with the scene. The Pony of Shadows then appears, and the score then shifts to his leitmotif. And this is a really big, bold, brass-driven motif. That brass really completely takes over the score here and kind of is backed by this like really march style in the percussion. So, but as the Pillars begin to start their spell, the string and piano instrumentation for them is once again brought to the forefront. And as they continue to battle with the Pony of Shadows right up to the point where they finally banish him, the string and horns, both of their different instrumentation, this kind of the strings and piano of the Pillars and the brass instrumentation of the Pony of Shadows is brought together into one piece here as they both battle, and eventually builds up to that climax when they finally banish him to limbo. I really, really like this track. There's one point that I really like. I'll try and point it out. I really like. And starting with their leitmotif here. Great use of leitmotifs in this episode. And those sweeping strings here. Comes the Pony of Shadows. This is his leitmotif. We'll hear this throughout the episode. brass heavy, very march oriented. Bringing back the score, the instrumentation for the pillars here, and I really like this part here. Eventually kind of cuts off there as the vision ends and as they've banished the Pony of Shadows there to limbo. Just an absolutely just fantastic score there. I love that part when everything picks up and you get both of those instrumentations kind of colliding at the end, and you get that little walk down the scale there on the horns to accentuate that final battle. It's really great and really intense score for that scene. From there, we progress to the part where the cutie map comes back to life here and informs them, the main six, of where to find these artifacts of the Pillars of Equestria. So when the map reactivates here, Anderson uses the same score as when it first activated, all the way back at the beginning of Season 5's premiere, and the track of the same name, the cutie map. So it's great to hear that return. We haven't really heard this particular version of it appear in the series again since it first appeared there. So it's really nice to hear this map leitmotif here reappear as it's giving the main six another quest for all six of them. Backing for Twilight talking here, and here comes the math part. Again, a nice reuse. A nice use of leitmotifs here for that. From there, we get to the parts of the score for the next part of the episode where we go through each of the main six, going to the different locations and retrieving the quest items. So we get a different track for each of them. The first one I want to play, though, is the one for the flower, where Rarity goes and gets Miss Maine's flower, because this one, William Anderson brings back Miss Maine's two really great leitmotifs from Campfire Tales, which I think is, again, some of the best score from the series there, and that was definitely the best part of that episode, was Rarity's tale of Mistmane there. It begins with the more sinister motif for Sable's spirit as the old pony scolds Rarity, and then after Rarity trims and repairs the entire garden, it switches to the other Mistmane motif, which is just the more somber one that has the really simple instrumentation. It's really great that they reused this score in this episode, because it was some of the best of the series. Here comes that first leitmotif. There we go through a couple other scenes. We have some really cool, intense orchestral music that mixes in some electric guitar for the dragon scene with Rainbow Dash. We hear Cattail and and that location's leitmotif make a return for that track with that kind of bayou sounding score there. And then finally we get to the one with Pinky, who's retrieving the final Pillar's item, a blindfold. So, and this one, the Egyptian-inspired score from Daring Dunn makes a short reappearance here as well. Goes to some Pinky score from there, but it's nice having this not only story continuity but having this musical continuity between the series there throughout the season as well. From there we get to the final track from the first part of this two-parter here. This is when the group of the main six winds up releasing all the pillars and then winds up also releasing the Pony of Shadows. So we start off with Starlight continuing to question if releasing the pillars is the best thing to do, and during her dialogue here we get her Starlight Glimmer's leitmotif subtly making an appearance in the score behind her dialogue there. Once all the quest items are in place and they begin casting the spell, the music takes on some more magical kind of harpeggios and strings to match that scene there. But then it really builds up again, and the horns come back in very strong when the Pony of Shadows returns, and the ends the episode on a really high note musically in terms of the horn note it hits at the very end, but with this really dissonant chord that you expect from most ends of two-parters of Pony. You can hear Starlight's leitmotif here. Getting ready to cast the spell here. Here we go. Star Swirl is like, what have you done? This is part of the dialogue. Only bring us back, and here comes the Pony of Shadows. From there, we get into the second episode of the two-parter here. We get a short little suite. I won't play it, but it recaps some of the score from the first episode there. And now we get to the scene where the Pony of Shadows returns, and we have this dialogue going between him and Star Swirl and the rest of the group there. So his brass-heavy leitmotif starts the track off right away before transitioning to a string-driven part behind some of the dialogue here. But the Shadows theme continues to appear as the track continues and the battle continues. And it plays one more time at the conclusion, right as he teleports away. So there's the shadows leitmotif there right at the beginning. The Pony of Shadows leitmotif there again. From there, the group all returns back to Twilight's tree here. Starsorrel goes back and he can sense the magic within the map and recognizes the Tree of Harmony's map, and he kind of makes that little image of the Tree of Harmony appear on top of it. As we see this image of the tree, William Anderson brings back its leitmotif, which we haven't heard since all the way back on the Season 4 premiere. We heard that theme in the track Saving Twilight in the Tree in that episode. So it's nice to hear that leitmotif for the Tree of Harmony make a short appearance for this episode, as well as the tree makes a appear. The different pillars then discuss the situation, and as a few of them speak, the score transitions between their musical instrumentation, starting with Egyptian-inspired instrumentation for Sonambula, then the Asian one for Mistmane, and finally kind of that Bayou Southern style of music for Meadowbrook. The trees motif, very atmospheric. There's Mistmane's score. That score there for Meadowbrook. That kind of continues from there. We'll skip ahead a little bit here, and we will get to the part where the map calls the main six here to Hollow Shades, signifying friendship problems. So, being that this is a map episodes, as we have with most of them, we have the scene with them being summoned to it, and it has the familiar map leitmotif here to boot. I think this is the first time since the Season 5 premiere that the map is called all of the main six. So the version here utilizes that fully orchestrated version of the theme that was used first back in the Season 5 premiere, the Cutie map. we're going to fast forward to the part where Starlight is hearing the story of Stygian's apparent betrayal from the other pillars and how he became the Pony of Shadows. So after a March intro, as we see Stygian sort of setting everyone up and they're going off to fight the Sirens here, we arrive at the Sirens actually, like I said, surprisingly being featured in this episode in their equestrian forms. From here, the score adds in their captivating chorus of vocals like we've heard from them in the past. They're very siren-y types of vocals that we've heard from them before. As they're defeated, we hear a short triumphant fanfare before it turns really dark and sinister, the score, as the dejected Stygian just walks away. It then turns more mystical as he gathers all of the items at Ponehenge and eventually becomes the Pony of Shadows at the end there. Come the Sirens here. Him starting to gather all those materials up at Ponehenge. Forward ahead a little bit here, we'll have a short track here of orchestra music that is used to back the main six here, removing the elements from the Tree of Harmony again. Very triumphant march for that scene there. We then arrive at a very short track here that introduces Hollow Shades. It's very kind of creepy and mysterious. And we're getting close to the end here. Now we get to the Battle of the Well of Shades here, where the Pony of Shadows and the group battles in that location. The track begins with some creepy atmospheric score before the horns are brought in by the as the Pony of Shadows appears. So we get his horn leitmotif there again. For I think Matt's asleep. Mute him there real quick. So after this, the score remains very unsettling and atmospheric for the dialogue that's driven by some piano there. It picks up again as the group begins to cast their spell in the shadow, becoming extremely intense and dissonant, but as Twilight spots a pony inside the shadow there, the orchestra cuts out and leaves just a few well-placed notes on the piano right before Twilight jumps in, which is a really nice use of the score there. A little bit of atmospheric score here for the Well of Shade as we start off. shadows motif there. Here they're starting to do their spell. Comes that piano part. And then Twilight jumps in there into the shadow. From there, we get the score of when she's in the shadow here. It starts out very extremely atmospheric here, with a few notes played on dulcimer here and there, and a lot of reverberation. Some sinister choir is also brought in as the scene progresses. As Starlight comes in as well, and the two talk to Stygian, a short inspirational melody is played on a glockenspiel and violin. The shadow then begins to fight back, and the score once again takes that dark, high-octane tone. This continues as the group all bands together to pull Stygian out of the shadow, and becomes more and more triumphant as they get closer to succeeding. It starts really atmospheric here. It's really nice. A lot of some of the score you'd hear in the God of War game. Comes Starlight in, so it's starting to get a little more inspirational here. No real beat here. Get a little bit of that glockenspiel and string there. Now we pick up again. Hear them struggling to pull him out here in the score. Very triumphant end as they finally succeed in doing so. The second to last track here, we get Star Swirl talking to his old friend Stygian and apologizing. For this scene, we get this really nice guitar melody, acoustic guitar melody here. The simple guitar and piano tune just really drives the emotion of the scene home. And then a short piano part plays down a scale at the end, signifying the map's mission accomplished theme as the QD marks pulse at the end. Here comes that acoustic guitar part up here. finale, we get to the final track of the episode here. And this episode ends, of course, with Starswirl reuniting with his old Celestia and Luna. The track begins with a familiar lesson motif. This piano theme has been heard a few times this season, notably last season in the episode at the end of the episode, Every Little Thing She Does. You'll probably recognizing it from a few previous appearances. However, in its appearance here, an additional acoustic guitar has been added on top, giving the track a little bit more flair. And in addition, the version here has been extended to a longer version with a new middle part here, which contains some additional different arpeggios on the piano. The track end episode finishes off with a traditional episode ending chord, which has been used a lot in the recent seasons. So it's a really nice, beautiful way, an emotional way to end this episode. Here starts that motif right here. And right here is the new addition to it for this extended second verse. This big ending here. Little drop down as Twilight and Starlight converse, and then the big traditional kind of ending here. Oh, really good. Such a really great episode musically with the score, and just again some of the best score of the series, and definitely the best of the two-parters. Only fault is there's no music in the credits, which is a little disappointing. But just there's so much music jam-packed in the episode itself that it was well worth it there. Exactly. I still think 7 seasons in, this was probably my favorite two-parter, and has some of the best music in the show, and that's saying something after some of the other score we've got this season, and the score for the last 2 season finales has been fantastic as well. So it's nice to hear it still keeping on and still being so great, and I really love when we get to these two-parters and we have this much more orchestral score and movie style kind of score, and seeing what they can do with it. Again, that new leitmotif for the Pillars of Equestria is just so good. I loved how the episode started with that musically, and I just loved how that theme sounded, and it's a great addition to the score repertoire of the show here, and very much a very movie quality sound to it. So great job to William Anderson and Kelly Davidson on this one. Really outdid themselves for that, and really looking to see what we hear more of in season 8 coming up. So yeah, now that I've rambled on about the music long enough, I do have to get dinner soon, so let's try and end this pretty quickly. What did everyone think of the theme? And the thing is, it's me and Mr. Ben in the call now.
I believe so.
So, Mr. Ben, what did you think of the moral and the theme of the episode?
Well, the theme and the moral here, I suppose it would be never to assume the worst of your friends, especially at the first sight of trouble. Just listen to what they may have to actually say and help them through their problems.
Yep.
So.
And of course, a whole other theme of this one relating to that is, of course, like this theme of like sort of depression or rejection that Stygian goes through, and friendship kind of being one of the solutions to that there, and how friends can help friends work through stuff as well.
say, yeah, DM12 also has another one, is that there is also more than one solution to a problem. Just because there is one situation that was solved the first time, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best solution. Always be willing to explore other options.
Yep. So, favorite parts of the episode, or any least favorite parts anyone has?
Oh, I really can't decide on what a favorite part
The
is. There's
entire
just so
fucking
much on
thing.
it. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
If I had to boil it down, it would be the music for me, of course, was great, and again, just having Star Swirl in the episode was great to actually have that happen in the series after 7 years of waiting to see more of him. It was great that they actually went there and did it so wonderfully. Yeah. Besides that, it's hard to pick out really anything else. The whole episode was just fantastic. So I guess overall feelings, final thoughts, conclusions.
Here's looking to see what season 8 has to offer, I guess.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny. I'm finding myself wanting to say, oh man, it's going to be interesting to see if they can top this episode. I don't know if they can, but then again, I said that for the season 5 finale, and I said that for the season 6 finale, and here we are, and they just keep topping themselves. I mean, I didn't think anything would be able to top the season 5 finale. That thing was so great, and then yeah. So I can't wait to see what they do next.
I've mentioned this before, I don't know how many times, but I will continue to mention it every single time I think that this series cannot possibly top itself. It somehow finds a way to prove me wrong.
Yep. Yeah, just overall, just a fantastic episode. Just great job to Josh Haber coming back here and writing this episode. Great job to Nicole for her first episode writing on the show itself. That's quite the feat to help Josh write this episode, and I think she brought a lot to it. And I really look forward to seeing what she brings to the series in the coming season. And I believe she and Josh Haber are going to be the story editors next season, from what I've heard. So that is definitely going to be an interesting combination given this episode. So I really look forward to what they do. And of course, a big thanks to Joanne and Christine for setting up such a fantastic story arc for this season that Josh was able to finish out here. And I mean, they just delivered. I think I think I can safely call this my favorite season of the show. 7 seasons in, and I didn't think anything would stop season 5, but this season has just had so many great episodes and stories that I think I can easily say that. And they were a big part of that and wrote a lot of my favorite episodes this season. So I really hope they return to write some episodes next season as well, even if they aren't story editing, because they have a really big talent, and I'd love to see more stuff from them. Overall, just this episode is just a fantastic, like, if I wanted to point to something about the season, this is just a fantastic example of how great this season has been for the show, and it was just a perfect capper to this season. With that, we have been going on for nearing 4 hours now. My clock is running at 3 hours and 45 minutes that we've been broadcasting. Although, I guess it's about 3.5 minutes. 3 hours and 30 minutes since we waited a little bit to start. But yeah, we went almost the entire time that I allotted for it. So had a lot to talk about. So we better go ahead and stop it from there. So thank you all so much for participating in this discussion today. It's been really, really a lot of fun. No, it's not the longest. You must have not been there for the glory that was the Rainbow Rocks Triple E. Was it Rainbow Rocks, or was it was Friendship Games? It was Friendship Games, yeah.
I thought it was the original Equestria Girls.
No, it was
first.
No, Friendship Games was the first one we did on Triple E, because it came out remember, it came out just after we had started doing Triple E, because that came out in season 5. So that was the first one we did before we went back and did the first one in Rainbow Rocks.
See, I know that one went on for 6 hours, something like that.
It was over 6 hours. It was really bad.
Yeah.
So we'll never top that one. But thank you so much for joining us for this episode and discussing it, and thanks for joining us for all this season here on Triple E. It's been a really great season to discuss. We're not quite done yet. As per usual, next week we'll be back. Should be back on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and we will be having our Season 7 recap discussion, and we'll be discussing season 7 as a whole and what we liked, what we didn't like, favorite episodes, etc. about it. And I think there's a lot to discuss about this season as a whole, even just in this Legends of Equestria story arc here. So we'll be discussing that next week, and then the week after that, I believe we're going to try and discuss all of the Equestria Girls shorts that have happened on Discovery Family the past few months. So we'll be finally getting around to discussing all of those in one Triple E episode after that. So look forward to that the next couple of weeks. After that, we'll kind of see where we are. We'll definitely going to be getting back into Season 4, but we will be taking a little hiatus at the end of the year, as we normally do here for Triple E, through the end of November and December. So we'll play that by ear until we get to the hiatus for Triple E and pick it back up at the start of next year. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us for this extra long edition of Triple E. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care, folks. Later.